The moment my daughter called me useless in the middle of a crowded bank, every conversation around us seemed to stop. "You don't understand how the real world works anymore," Rachel snapped, pushing a thick stack of loan papers toward me. "For once in your life, can't you just sign your name and help your family?" I stared at the line that would place my home behind her husband's failing company, then quietly set the pen down. Before I could walk away, the branch manager rushed from his office. "Mrs. Butler," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need your approval before transferring the final $3.8 million from your private account." Rachel's face turned pale. "What private account?" she whispered. "If someone you loved humiliated you in public, would you forgive them or finally let them face the consequences of their choices? Stay with me until the end, because what Rachel discovered inside that bank was only the beginning. Please like this video if you believe a mother's worth should never be measured by what she can give. Subscribe for more emotional family stories and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. I would also love to know where you are watching from and what time it is there. Your words remind me that none of us has to face betrayal alone. 3 days before my daughter called me useless in front of an entire bank, I woke to the familiar sound of robins outside my bedroom window. For a few peaceful seconds, life felt exactly as it had for years. The morning sunlight slipped through the lace curtains Richard had insisted we keep even after everyone said they looked old-fashioned. Dust floated through the golden beams while the grandfather clock in the hallway announced 7 o'clock with its soft chime. I still smiled every morning when I heard that clock. Richard used to joke that as long as it kept ticking, so would we. Now it was just me. I climbed carefully out of bed, slipped on my faded blue robe, and walked down the hallway lined with photographs that quietly held the story of my life. Richard in his army uniform, Rachel holding her kindergarten diploma, baby Lily asleep on my shoulder. A Christmas morning where all 3 generations somehow fit into one tiny living room. Sometimes I wondered if photographs were kinder than memories. Pictures never showed the arguments that came later. They never captured the distance that slowly settled between people who once couldn't imagine living apart. I opened the back door and stepped onto my small porch. The July air already carried the promise of another hot Ohio afternoon. My vegetable garden waited patiently beside the fence. Tomatoes, green beans, fresh basil. Richard had built every raised garden bed with his own hands nearly 20 years earlier. I still refused to replace the weathered cedar boards. Every crack reminded me that beautiful things could last much longer than people expected if someone cared enough to maintain them. After watering the vegetables, I carried my coffee to the porch swing. It squeaked every time I sat down, another sound Richard always promised he would fix. I smiled despite myself. "I guess you'll have to keep reminding me," I whispered, toward the empty chair beside mine. Living alone had taught me something strange. You never truly stopped talking to the people you loved. You simply learned not to expect an answer. At 8 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. "Rachel." I smiled before answering. No matter how complicated our relationship had become, seeing my daughter's name still warmed my heart. "Good morning, sweetheart." "Morning, Mom." She sounded distracted. There was keyboard clicking in the background. Someone speaking loudly. A printer. She was already at work. "I hope I didn't wake you. I've been up for over an hour." "Oh." There was an awkward pause. "I actually need a favor." Of course. Lately, nearly every phone call began that way. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Did you sleep well?" Not, "I love you." Just, "I need a favor." "What is it?" "Our company is closing a really important contract this week. I thought business was getting better." "It is," she answered too quickly. "This deal changes everything." "I'm happy to hear that. I just need you to come to the bank with me Friday." "The bank?" "Yes." "What for?" "It's nothing complicated." Whenever someone started a sentence with those words, I had learned the opposite was usually true. "We're updating some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" "Identity verification." "Why would you need me for that?" Another pause. "They need one additional signature." My signature. Just to confirm some family information. I looked toward Richard's photograph hanging inside the kitchen. He had spent 40 years teaching me one simple financial rule. Never sign anything you haven't read. Not even for family. Especially not for family. "I'd like to read everything first." "You can." Rachel laughed, but it sounded forced. "It's honestly routine." "I'd still like to read it." "Of course." The conversation shifted. She asked about my blood pressure, my tomatoes, church, Lily, everything except the paperwork she had originally called about. When we hung up, an uneasy feeling settled into my stomach. I couldn't explain why. Rachel had never asked me to sign financial documents before. Not once. Around noon, I drove to the grocery store. Most people there knew me. Mrs. Jenkins from church hugged me near the produce section. Old Mr. Harris insisted on loading my bags into the cart, even though I told him I was perfectly capable. The cashier asked if I would be bringing another peach cobbler to the church fundraiser. It was a quiet life, predictable, simple. I liked it that way. On my way home, I passed the large event center downtown. A banner with Dawson Premier Events stretched across the entrance. Rachel's company. Seeing her name printed in giant gold letters filled me with pride. I remembered the little girl who used to decorate our living room with homemade birthday banners. She had always loved celebrations, always believed every person deserved to feel special for one day. That little girl still existed somewhere. I wanted desperately to believe she did. Back home, I found another voicemail. This time it was Lily. "Hi, Grandma." Her voice always made me smile. "I just wanted to check on you. You still coming Friday?" "I think so." "Good." She hesitated. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Never mind." "No, sweetheart." "What is it?" "It's nothing." "You don't sound like nothing." Silence. Then she spoke quietly. "Mom and Dad have been arguing every night." I sat down immediately. "About what?" "I don't really know." "But Dad keeps saying everything has to happen before Friday." My heart skipped. Friday, again. And Mom, she cries after they think I've gone to bed. That wasn't like Rachel. My daughter had always hated crying in front of anyone. Lily stopped again. "I don't like how scared she looks." "I'll talk to her. Please don't tell her I called." "I won't." After hanging up, I stood at the kitchen sink for several minutes without moving. Richard used to say there were two kinds of fear, the fear that shouted and the fear that whispered. The whisper was always more dangerous. Friday had become that whisper. Late Thursday afternoon, another call came. This one from Eric. "Mom." He rarely called me that. Usually it was Denise. "We're excited to see you tomorrow." "So am I." "I'll pick you up around 9. "I can drive myself." "No." He answered immediately. "It'll just be easier if we all go together." "I'm perfectly capable of driving." "I know." He laughed. "I just figured we'd grab lunch afterward." Lunch. That sounded nice. "It's been a while." It has. Before ending the call, he added one sentence that stayed with me all evening. "You've always said family helps family." After dinner, I stood in front of the hallway photographs again. Richard's smile seemed almost amused. "What would you tell me?" I asked quietly. The answer came so clearly I almost laughed. Read everything, every page, every word, no matter who gets impatient, no matter who gets offended. I went to bed with an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't name. Outside, summer thunder rolled softly across the Ohio sky. Inside, I had no idea that less than 24 hours later, my own daughter would call me useless in front of strangers, and that everything I believed about my family was about to change forever. Long before Rachel began looking at me as though I were a burden, she used to tell everyone I was the smartest woman she knew. When she was 8, she would sit at the kitchen table while I reviewed bank reports after dinner. She loved watching me run my finger down columns of numbers, circling anything that did not belong. "How do you always find the mistakes?" she once asked. "Because mistakes usually try too hard to look ordinary," I told her. She carried that sentence around for years. At school, whenever a teacher asked what her mother did, Rachel proudly said, "I protected people's money." That was not exactly my job title, but I liked her version better. I worked in records control and financial compliance at a small community bank in Columbus. I was good at it. Better than I ever allowed myself to admit. I could spot a missing authorization, an altered date, or a signature that did not quite match before most people finished reading the first page. My supervisor once told me I had the patience of a librarian and the instincts of a detective. At 39, I was offered a promotion that would have placed me in charge of the entire compliance department. It came with a larger salary, better benefits, and the kind of recognition I had quietly worked toward for nearly 2 decades. The offer arrived on a Tuesday. Richard collapsed in our kitchen that Friday. One moment he was teasing me about burning the cornbread. The next he was gripping the edge of the counter, his face drained of color. The doctors found serious damage to his heart. After that came appointments, medication schedules, procedures, and long nights listening to his breathing because I was afraid it might stop. I turned down the promotion. At the time, I told myself it was temporary. I reduced my hours so I could drive Richard to the hospital, organize his prescriptions, and help him recover after surgery. Then Rachel became pregnant with Lily, and she needed me too. There were mornings when I took Richard to cardiac rehabilitation, drove across town to watch Lily, and still made it to the bank before lunch. I was tired almost every day, but I did not resent them. That is the dangerous thing about love. Sometimes sacrifice feels so natural while you are making it that you do not notice how much of yourself has disappeared. Rachel knew some of what I had given up, but not all of it. When Lily was born 6 weeks early, Rachel and Eric were overwhelmed by hospital bills. Eric's insurance covered less than they expected, and Rachel had not yet built her event planning business. I paid the remaining balance. When they bought their first house, I provided most of the down payment. When Rachel's company nearly failed during its second year, I gave her enough money to cover payroll and unpaid vendor invoices. Each time I made the help sound smaller than it was. A refund, an old insurance payment, money Richard and I weren't using. I never wanted Rachel to feel indebted to me. Maybe that was my mistake. When people never see the cost of what you give them, they can begin to believe it cost you nothing. The largest sacrifice happened 8 years before that Friday at the bank. Richard and I owned a small parcel of land outside Delaware, Ohio. It had belonged to his father, and we once imagined building a retirement cottage there. The land had oak trees along the eastern edge and a narrow creek that filled after heavy rain. Richard loved that property. Rachel's business was in trouble after a major corporate client refused to pay a 6-figure invoice. She called me crying, saying employees would lose their jobs and her reputation would be destroyed. I sold the land. I never told her. I said the money came from one of Richard's old insurance policies. She accepted it with tears in her eyes and promised she would never forget what I had done. But she did forget. Or perhaps she never truly understood. Eric entered our lives when Rachel was 29. At first I liked him. He was confident, polished, and attentive. He sent flowers on my birthday and offered to repair things around the house. He spoke about ambition as if it were a moral virtue. But over time, I noticed the small comments. He laughed at my 10-year-old car. He asked why I still clipped grocery coupons. He once looked around my living room and said, "You know, Denise, some people are so afraid of losing money that they never learn how to enjoy it." Rachel laughed with him. It was not cruel laughter then, not yet, but something shifted after that. She began apologizing for my house when friends visited. She bought me expensive handbags I never asked for, then seemed irritated when I continued carrying the brown leather purse Richard had given me. She stopped asking for my opinion about business and started explaining things to me as if I had never worked a day in my life. I told myself it was normal. Children grew up. Marriages changed loyalties. Mothers had to step back. Richard saw it differently. During the last year of his life, he became more direct about Rachel and Eric. "They are spending money faster than they can earn it," he told me one evening. We were sitting in his hospital room after another procedure. His skin looked thin beneath the fluorescent light, but his mind remained sharp. "They're building a life on appearances." "They're young," I said. "They'll learn. Not if you keep paying for every lesson before it hurts." I looked away. He knew me too well. "She's our daughter." "Yes," he said gently. "And loving her does not mean removing every consequence from her path." I felt defensive. "What do you expect me to do? Watch her lose everything? If losing something teaches her to stop risking what belongs to other people, then maybe." His words upset me. I did not want to imagine Rachel becoming someone who endangered others for the sake of status. Richard reached for my hand. "Promise me something." I hated when he spoke that way. It sounded too much like goodbye. "What? Do not give them everything because you are afraid they will stop loving you." My throat tightened. "They would never, Denise." He squeezed my fingers. "Promise me." I looked into the face of the man who had known me for 42 years. "I promise." After he died, that promise became both a comfort and a burden. Every time Rachel needed something, I heard his voice. Every time I said no, I wondered whether I was honoring my husband or failing my daughter. The night before Eric was supposed to take me to the bank, I barely slept. At 2 a.m, I went downstairs and made tea. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Richard's old chair sat empty across from me. My phone lit up on the table. It was a message from Lily. "Are you awake?" I called her immediately. She answered in a whisper. "Grandma." "What happened?" "I heard them fighting again." "Your parents?" "Yes." I could hear a door close somewhere behind her. "What were they saying?" "Dad said everything had to be finished before Friday afternoon." My hand tightened around the phone. "What has to be finished, I don't know." Lily breathed unevenly. "Mom said, what if she reads it?" A cold feeling moved through me. "And what did Eric say?" "He said you wouldn't understand it." I closed my eyes. There was more. I could hear it in Lily's silence. "What else, sweetheart?" She hesitated before answering. "Mom asked what would happen if you refused, and Dad said she needed to stop acting like a child and make you do the right thing." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Lily whispered, "Grandma, please be careful." After we ended the call, I sat alone at the kitchen table until dawn. The daughter I had once taught to look for what did not belong was now afraid I might read a document too closely. And for the first time, I wondered whether Friday's deadline was not about saving Rachel's company. Maybe it was about using me before I had time to understand what they were really asking. Eric arrived at 9 the next morning in a black SUV polished so brightly that the summer sunlight flashed across my living room wall before he even reached the porch. I watched him through the window as he checked his reflection in the driver's side glass, straightened his collar, and slipped his phone into his jacket pocket. For a man whose company was supposedly doing well, he looked as though he had not slept. When I opened the door, he smiled, ready to save the day. The words were meant to sound playful. They did not. I thought I was only confirming some family information. That's all. He kissed my cheek and reached for my purse as if I were too fragile to carry it. I've got it. I can manage my own bag. Of course you can. His smile remained, but his fingers tightened around the leather handle before he released it. Rachel was already sitting in the front passenger seat. She wore a cream-colored suit and large sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy. She turned when I climbed into the back. Hi, Mom. Her voice was bright in the way people sound when they are trying too hard to appear calm. Good morning. She looked at my brown purse. You still carry that old thing your father gave it to me. I know. I just thought the new one I bought you would look better today. Better for whom? She sighed and turned forward. Eric started the engine. For the first few minutes, no one mentioned the bank. Rachel talked about a wedding her company had organized at a hotel near downtown Columbus. She described imported flowers, a 5-tier cake, and a string quartet from Cincinnati. I listened politely. Then Eric's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and declined the call. It rang again less than a minute later. This time, he answered through the car's speaker. I told you I'm handling it, he said sharply. A man's voice replied, but Eric immediately lowered the volume. You'll have confirmation this afternoon. He ended the call without saying goodbye. Rachel stared out the window. Business problem, I asked. Nothing we can't fix, Eric said, with my signature. The muscles in his jaw tightened. Rachel turned around. Mom, please don't start. I asked a reasonable question, and we already explained it. No, you said it was identity verification. It is part of the verification process. That is not the same answer. Eric raised one hand from the steering wheel. Let's wait until we're inside. The bank officer can explain everything. I looked at the document folder resting between Rachel's feet. A yellow tab protruded from the side. My name was printed across it in bold black letters. Denise Butler. I said nothing more during the drive, but I watched. I watched Eric grip the steering wheel every time his phone lit up. I watched Rachel rub the edge of her thumbnail until the skin turned red. And I watched the folder as though it were an animal waiting to move. The bank was busy when we arrived. It was the last Friday of the month, and every teller station had a line. A young mother tried to calm a crying toddler near the entrance. 2 elderly men argued quietly about whose turn it was to use the coin machine. Ordinary people handling ordinary money. I had spent much of my life in places like that. Banks had a rhythm. People imagined they were quiet, but they were full of small sounds, the clicking of keyboards, the whisper of counting machines, the sliding of paper across polished counters. Those sounds once made me feel at home. That morning, they made me alert. A loan officer named Ashley greeted Eric by name. That told me this was not their first conversation. Mr. Dawson, she said, forcing a professional smile. We've been expecting you. Then she looked at Rachel. And Mrs. Dawson. Her eyes moved to me. You must be Mrs. Butler. I am. Wonderful. We should be able to finish everything quickly. That depends on what everything is. Her smile hesitated. Eric answered before she could. Mom likes to be thorough. There's nothing wrong with that, Ashley said. But she looked at Eric, not me. She led us to a desk separated from the lobby by low glass panels. The space offered the appearance of privacy without providing any. Eric placed the folder in front of me. Here we are. He opened it to a page marked with a blue tab. A signature line waited at the bottom. My name had already been typed beneath it. Before I sign anything, I want to read the entire agreement. Rachel removed her sunglasses. We went over this. No, you talked around it. Mom, we're on a deadline. So I've heard. Her eyes widened slightly. I could tell she was wondering who had told me. Eric leaned closer. It's a standard commercial lending package. What is the loan amount? He glanced at Ashley. $950,000, she said. I looked at Rachel. Nearly $1 million. She had called it a small favor. What is the money for working capital? Eric replied. We landed a major hospitality contract. We need temporary liquidity to cover vendor costs. Then why do you need me? Ashley turned several pages. The lender requires additional security because of the company's current debt ratio. Additional security meaning what no one answered immediately. I pulled the folder toward me. Rachel placed her hand on top of it. Mom, move your hand. The words came out quietly. She obeyed. I read the first page, then the second. By the fourth, my heartbeat had changed. The document did not describe me as someone confirming family information. It listed me as a personal guarantor. I continued reading. The primary collateral included business equipment receivables and Rachel and Eric's residence. Then I reached the secondary collateral section. My address was there. The little house Richard and I had spent 30 years paying for. The house where I had held his hand as he took his final breath. The house where Rachel had taken her first steps. They had placed it behind their loan. This says, my home is collateral. Rachel's face lost color. It's only secondary. That does not make it imaginary. Eric leaned back. The likelihood of the bank ever touching your property is practically zero. Then use your own property. We are. And apparently mine. Ashley looked uncomfortable. I was under the impression Mrs. Butler had already agreed in principle. I have never agreed to anything. Eric's voice hardened. We discussed this as a family. No, you discussed it with Rachel. I turned another page. A digital signature appeared at the bottom. Denise Butler. It looked convincing from a distance. Up close, it was wrong. The D curved too sharply. The final R lifted instead of closing. Someone had copied the appearance of my signature without understanding how my hand moved. What is this? Rachel stared at the page. Eric answered immediately. It's a placeholder authorization. That is not a legal term. It allowed the underwriting team to begin processing. With a signature I did not provide, Ashley straightened. Mr. Dawson, you told us the applicant had authorized electronic submission. She had. No, I said. I did not. Several people in the lobby turned toward us. Rachel lowered her voice. Can we please not make a scene? I am not the one who put a false signature on a loan application. Her cheeks reddened. Everything Eric has done is to protect our company. Did you know my house was listed? She looked away. That was my answer. You knew. I knew it might be included temporarily. Temporarily until what? Until you repaid the loan or until the bank took it? Mom, stop talking like we're criminals. I am talking like someone who has read the document. Eric slid the folder away from me. You're twisting this. I reached for it. He held it down. Let go. Denise, listen to me. We have a contract that will make this loan irrelevant within 6 months. Then wait 6 months and use your profits. We can't. Why not? His expression changed. For 1 second, the confidence disappeared. Then Rachel spoke. Because payroll is due. The truth entered the space between us. This was not expansion money. This was survival money. How far behind are you, Mom? That isn't the point. It is exactly the point. I looked at Ashley. Are there existing defaults? She glanced toward Eric. I'm not authorized to discuss. Do not answer her, Eric said. His tone was so sharp that the young loan officer flinched. A few heads turned again. Rachel saw them watching. That was when embarrassment became anger. You always do this, she said. Do what make everything harder than it needs to be. I am protecting my home. You live alone in a small house you barely use. Her words struck harder than I expected. Barely use. You know what I mean. No. Explain it. She stood abruptly. I mean, you're retired? You sit in that house, clip coupons, 10 vegetables, and act as if every dollar is sacred while the rest of us are trying to build something. I felt the lobby grow quieter around us. Eric reached for her arm, but she pulled away. Rachel, he warned. She did not stop. You don't understand modern business. You don't understand risk. You don't understand what it takes to support employees and a family. I understand enough to recognize a false signature. Her face twisted with humiliation. For once in your life, can't you just help without turning it into some moral lesson? I stared at my daughter. The same child who once told everyone I protected people's money now looked at me as though caution were a character flaw. I have helped you more times than you know. She laughed bitterly. With what advice leftovers? A few checks years ago. My throat tightened. I thought of the hospital bills, the down payment, the land Richard had loved, all the things I had hidden so she would never feel ashamed. And now my silence had become evidence against me. Rachel pushed the pen toward me. Just sign it. No. Her voice rose. You are unbelievable. No, Rachel. I am done signing away pieces of my life to protect choices I was never allowed to question. The words landed between us. Then she said the one thing I would remember long after every legal document had been filed away. You're useless. The lobby went still. Not completely. Machines kept humming, phones kept ringing. But human attention shifted toward us. I saw pity on one woman's face, discomfort on another's. Rachel realized too late how loud she had been. I placed the pen on the desk. My hands were steady. I will not sign this. Then I closed the folder and stood. Before I could take a single step, a man's voice called from across the lobby. "Mrs. Butler." I turned. Michael Hayes, the branch manager, was walking toward us with an expression I could not read. He looked at me, then at the documents, then at Ashley. "Stop processing this application immediately," he said. Eric rose. "There must be some misunderstanding." Michael ignored him. His eyes returned to me with unmistakable respect. "Mrs. Butler, I'm glad you came in. We've been trying to reach you about the final transfer into your private account." Rachel went completely still. Michael lowered his voice, but not enough to hide the words. "The amount is $3.8 million. My daughter stared at me as though the woman standing before her had suddenly become a stranger. And for the first time that morning, Eric looked genuinely afraid. For several seconds after Michael said the words, $3.8 million, no one moved. Rachel stared at me with her mouth slightly open. Eric's face changed in a quieter way. His eyes narrowed, and the fear I had seen for a moment disappeared behind calculation. Ashley, the loan officer, looked from Michael to me as if she had suddenly realized she was sitting beside an entirely different woman from the one Eric had described. Michael seemed to recognize that the conversation had become too sensitive for the middle of the lobby. "Mrs. Butler," he said, "would you come with me, please?" "I'm coming too," Rachel said immediately. Michael's expression remained professional. "That decision belongs to Mrs. Butler." My daughter looked at me. There was anger in her face, but beneath it was something more painful. Disbelief. "You have to explain this. I should have refused." After what she had just said to me, I had every right to walk into Michael's office alone and leave her standing beside the fraudulent papers she had helped bring into that bank. But she was still my daughter, and I needed to know how deeply she was involved. "They can come," I said. Michael nodded once. "Bring the file." Ashley gathered the documents with shaking hands. Michael led us beyond the teller stations through a secured door and into a conference room at the back of the bank. The room had no windows except for a narrow glass panel beside the door. A long walnut table filled most of the space. Michael waited until we were seated before closing the door. Eric placed himself beside Rachel. I sat across from them. Michael remained standing. "Before we discuss anything," he said, "I need to make one point clear. Mrs. Butler is the only person in this room authorized to receive information about her accounts." Rachel folded her arms. "I'm her daughter. That does not make you an authorized signer. She just allowed us in. She allowed you to hear this conversation. She did not grant you ownership of the information." Eric offered a polite smile. "We understand, Michael. It was the first time he had used the manager's first name." Michael did not return the familiarity. "Do you—" The question was quiet, but it changed the room. Michael sat down and opened a thin folder he had carried from his office. "Mrs. Butler, we have been trying to contact you regarding the final liquidation payment from the Hartwell Medical acquisition." I nodded. "I received Patricia's message yesterday. I planned to call her after this appointment." Rachel leaned forward. "Who is Patricia?" "My attorney." "You have an attorney managing millions of dollars, and you never thought to tell me I did not know I was required to report my private finances to you." Her eyes filled with hurt. "You let me believe you were struggling. I never said I was struggling. You clip coupons. You drive a car that is almost 15 years old. It runs. You mend your own clothes. I know how to sew. You live like you have nothing. I live like I have enough." Eric touched Rachel's arm. "Let's not turn this into an argument." It was almost impressive how quickly his tone had softened. Only minutes earlier, he had held down a folder containing a false signature and told me I was twisting the facts. Now he looked at me with gentle concern. "Denise," he said, "none of us knew. That's all Rachel is reacting to. Do not call me Denise as if we are discussing a family misunderstanding." His smile weakened. Michael opened his folder. "The current value of the account is approximately $3.8 million. However, the funds are held under a restricted trust structure." Rachel looked confused. "What does restricted mean?" "It means Michael said the money cannot simply be withdrawn or pledged at will." Eric leaned forward. "What kind of restrictions?" Michael looked at me rather than him. "May I explain the general structure?" "Yes. The account was created to fund a charitable program established by Mrs. Butler and her late husband. Most distributions must meet the purposes stated in the trust agreement. The account cannot be used as collateral for personal or commercial debt." The hope that had briefly appeared in Eric's face vanished. There must be some flexibility, he said. Not for this loan. What if Denise makes a direct investment in the company that would require legal review by the trustee and her attorney? Then it isn't impossible. It is not something you should assume. Rachel looked at me. A charitable program, yes. For strangers. For women who need help rebuilding their lives. Her face tightened. You hid millions of dollars so you could give them to strangers while your own daughter was fighting to keep her business alive. The accusation struck differently from the word useless. That insult had been born from anger. This came from entitlement. You brought me here under false pretenses, I said. You placed my home behind a loan without my consent, and now you are angry that my money is not available to fix it. I didn't know about the house. You knew enough to sign my name. She flinched. Eric turned toward her. Rachel, don't say anything else until we understand exactly what happened. Michael's attention sharpened. Mrs. Dawson, did you sign your mother's name? Rachel looked at Eric before answering. That one glance told me more than any confession could have. Eric spoke first. She signed a preliminary authorization because Denise had already verbally agreed to help. I did no such thing. We discussed family support several times. Discussing family support is not permission to forge my signature. It was not forgery, Eric insisted. It was an administrative placeholder. Michael's expression hardened. There is no legitimate banking procedure called an administrative placeholder signature. Eric's face reddened. Then the paperwork was handled incorrectly. Michael slid a document from his folder and placed it in front of me. It was not one of the pages I had already seen. At the top was an asset verification request bearing my name, address, date of birth, and partial social security number. At the bottom was another copied signature. This was submitted 9 days ago, Michael said. My skin went cold. 9 days. Yes. I had not spoken to either of them about a bank appointment 9 days ago. Michael nodded. That is one reason the request was flagged. Eric shifted in his chair. Your system is overreacting to routine preparation. Michael ignored him. We also recorded multiple attempts to access information connected to Mrs. Butler's profile. What kind of information, I asked? Account relationships, property verification, and available assets. Rachel shook her head. I never tried to access Mom's account. I did not say you did. Michael turned another page toward us. One request originated from an internet connection registered to Dawson Premier Events. Silence settled over the table. Eric recovered first. We have more than 20 employees. Anyone could have used that network. Possibly, Michael said. That is why the matter is being reviewed. This is ridiculous. What is ridiculous, I said, is that you knew enough about my private assets to go looking for them. I didn't know about $3.8 million, but you suspected there was something. Eric looked away. Rachel's breathing had become shallow. She reached for the verification request. Michael stopped her. That is a bank copy. I only want to see the signature. He moved the page closer without releasing it. Rachel stared at the name. So did I. The first letter was too large. The final stroke curved upward. It was not my signature, but I had seen that handwriting many times. On birthday cards, shipping labels, notes left beside casseroles in my refrigerator. I looked at my daughter. Rachel. Her eyes filled immediately. Mom, I can explain. Eric placed a hand on her wrist. Do not let them pressure you. She pulled away from him. You told me it was only permission to check her credit. It was. You said the bank needed it before they could show us the options. They did. Michael spoke carefully. Mrs. Dawson, did you write your mother's name on this form? Rachel began to cry. Not loudly. The tears simply spilled over while she stared at the table. Yes. My heart did not break all at once. It broke in small, precise places, in the memory of teaching her to write her name, in the birthday cards she had signed with love, in every form I had completed for her when she was too young to understand what a signature meant. You knew it was wrong, I said. I thought you would agree when we explained everything. So you signed first and planned to ask me later. I was scared. Of losing the company, of losing everything. Eric turned toward her. We are not losing everything. Rachel looked at him through tears. Then why did you tell me Lily might have to leave school? Why did you say people would come after us if we missed Friday's deadline? His jaw tightened. That was private. No, I said. Not anymore. Michael closed the file. This loan application is suspended. No documents associated with Mrs. Butler will be processed until the fraud review is complete. Eric stood. You cannot destroy our company over a misunderstanding. Michael remained seated. I am not responsible for the information submitted under a false signature. Eric looked at me then. The softness was gone. You could still fix this. I studied the man my daughter had trusted more than her own mother. No, I said. The first thing I am going to fix is the mistake of believing your desperation gave you the right to use me." Rachel covered her face with both hands. And as I watched her cry, I realized the most painful truth was not that she had forged my name. It was that she had done it believing my consent was only a detail to be handled later. For several seconds after Michael said the words $3.8 million, no one moved. Rachel stared at me with her mouth slightly open. Eric's face changed in a quieter way. His eyes narrowed, and the fear I had seen for a moment disappeared behind calculation. "Ashley!" The loan officer looked from Michael to me as if she had suddenly realized she was sitting beside an entirely different woman from the one Eric had described. Michael seemed to recognize that the conversation had become too sensitive for the middle of the lobby. "Mrs. Butler," he said, "would you come with me, please?" "I'm coming too," Rachel said immediately. Michael's expression remained professional. "That decision belongs to Mrs. Butler." My daughter looked at me. There was anger in her face, but beneath it was something more painful. Disbelief. "You have to explain this." I should have refused. After what she had just said to me, I had every right to walk into Michael's office alone and leave her standing beside the fraudulent papers she had helped bring into that bank. But she was still my daughter, and I needed to know how deeply she was involved. "They can come," I said. Michael nodded once. "Bring the file." Ashley gathered the documents with shaking hands. Michael led us beyond the teller stations, through a secured door and into a conference room at the back of the bank. The room had no windows except for a narrow glass panel beside the door. A long walnut table filled most of the space. Michael waited until we were seated before closing the door. Eric placed himself beside Rachel. I sat across from them. Michael remained standing. "Before we discuss anything," he said, "I need to make one point clear. Mrs. Butler is the only person in this room authorized to receive information about her accounts." Rachel folded her arms. "I'm her daughter. That does not make you an authorized signer. She just allowed us in. She allowed you to hear this conversation. She did not grant you ownership of the information." Eric offered a polite smile. "We understand, Michael." It was the first time he had used the manager's first name. Michael did not return the familiarity. "Do you?" The question was quiet, but it changed the room. Michael sat down and opened a thin folder he had carried from his office. "Mrs. Butler, we have been trying to contact you regarding the final liquidation payment from the Hartwell Medical acquisition." I nodded. "I received Patricia's message yesterday. I plan to call her after this appointment." Rachel leaned forward. "Who is Patricia?" "My attorney. You have an attorney managing millions of dollars, and you never thought to tell me I did not know I was required to report my private finances to you." Her eyes filled with hurt. "You let me believe you were struggling. I never said I was struggling. You clip coupons. You drive a car that is almost 15 years old. It runs. You mend your own clothes. I know how to sew. You live like you have nothing. I live like I have enough." Eric touched Rachel's arm. "Let's not turn this into an argument." It was almost impressive how quickly his tone had softened. Only minutes earlier, he had held down a folder containing a false signature and told me I was twisting the facts. Now he looked at me with gentle concern. "Denise," he said, "none of us knew. That's all Rachel is reacting to." "Do not call me Denise as if we are discussing a family misunderstanding." His smile weakened. Michael opened his folder. "The current value of the account is approximately $3.8 million. However, the funds are held under a restricted trust structure." Rachel looked confused. "What does restricted mean?" "It means Michael said the money cannot simply be withdrawn or pledged at will." Eric leaned forward. "What kind of restrictions?" Michael looked at me rather than him. "May I explain the general structure?" "Yes." The account was created to fund a charitable program established by Mrs. Butler and her late husband. Most distributions must meet the purposes stated in the trust agreement. The account cannot be used as collateral for personal or commercial debt. The hope that had briefly appeared in Eric's face vanished. "There must be some flexibility," he said. "Not for this loan. What if Denise makes a direct investment in the company? That would require legal review by the trustee and her attorney. Then it isn't impossible. It is not something you should assume." Rachel looked at me. "A charitable program? Yes. For strangers. For women who need help rebuilding their lives." Her face tightened. "You hid millions of dollars so you could give them to strangers while your own daughter was fighting to keep her business alive." The accusation struck differently from the word useless. That insult had been born from anger. This came from entitlement. "You brought me here under false pretenses," I said. "You placed my home behind a loan without my consent, and now you are angry that my money is not available to fix it. I didn't know about the house. You knew enough to sign my name." She flinched. Eric turned toward her. Rachel, don't say anything else until we understand exactly what happened. Michael's attention sharpened. Mrs. Dawson, did you sign your mother's name? Rachel looked at Eric before answering. That one glance told me more than any confession could have. Eric spoke first. She signed a preliminary authorization because Denise had already verbally agreed to help. I did no such thing. We discussed family support several times. Discussing family support is not permission to forge my signature. It was not forgery, Eric insisted. It was an administrative placeholder. Michael's expression hardened. There is no legitimate banking procedure called an administrative placeholder signature. Eric's face reddened. Then the paperwork was handled incorrectly. Michael slid a document from his folder and placed it in front of me. It was not one of the pages I had already seen. At the top was an asset verification request bearing my name, address, date of birth, and partial social security number. At the bottom was another copied signature. This was submitted 9 days ago, Michael said. My skin went cold. 9 days. Yes, I had not spoken to either of them about a bank appointment 9 days ago. Michael nodded. That is one reason the request was flagged. Eric shifted in his chair. Your system is overreacting to routine preparation. Michael ignored him. We also recorded multiple attempts to access information connected to Mrs. Butler's profile. What kind of information, I asked. Account relationships, property verification, and available assets. Rachel shook her head. I never tried to access Mom's account. I did not say you did. Michael turned another page toward us. One request originated from an internet connection registered to Dawson Premier Events. Silence settled over the table. Eric recovered first. We have more than 20 employees. Anyone could have used that network. Possibly, Michael said. That is why the matter is being reviewed. This is ridiculous. What is ridiculous, I said, is that you knew enough about my private assets to go looking for them. I didn't know about $3.8 million. But you suspected there was something. Eric looked away. Rachel's breathing had become shallow. She reached for the verification request. Michael stopped her. That is a bank copy. I only want to see the signature. He moved the page closer without releasing it. Rachel stared at the name. So did I. The first letter was too large. The final stroke curved upward. It was not my signature, but I had seen that handwriting many times. On birthday cards, shipping labels, notes left beside casseroles in my refrigerator. I looked at my daughter. Rachel. Her eyes filled immediately. Mom, I can explain. Eric placed a hand on her wrist. Do not let them pressure you. She pulled away from him. You told me it was only permission to check her credit. It was. You said the bank needed it before they could show us the options. They did. Michael spoke carefully. Mrs. Dawson, did you write your mother's name on this form? Rachel began to cry. Not loudly. The tears simply spilled over while she stared at the table. Yes. My heart did not break all at once. It broke in small, precise places, in the memory of teaching her to write her name, in the birthday cards she had signed with love, in every form I had completed for her when she was too young to understand what a signature meant. You knew it was wrong, I said. I thought you would agree when we explained everything, so you signed first and planned to ask me later. I was scared. Of losing the company, of losing everything. Eric turned toward her. We are not losing everything. Rachel looked at him through tears. Then why did you tell me Lily might have to leave school? Why did you say people would come after us if we missed Friday's deadline? His jaw tightened. That was private. No, I said. Not anymore. Michael closed the file. This loan application is suspended. No documents associated with Mrs. Butler will be processed until the fraud review is complete. Eric stood. You cannot destroy our company over a misunderstanding. Michael remained seated. I am not responsible for the information submitted under a false signature. Eric looked at me then. The softness was gone. You could still fix this. I studied the man my daughter had trusted more than her own mother. No, I said. The first thing I'm going to fix is the mistake of believing your desperation gave you the right to use me. Rachel covered her face with both hands, and as I watched her cry, I realized the most painful truth was not that she had forged my name. It was that she had done it believing my consent was only a detail to be handled later. Rachel sat across from me with tears drying on her cheeks, but the question in her eyes had changed. She was no longer asking whether I had money. She was asking who I had been all these years. Michael gave me time to answer. Eric did not. So this trust, he said, leaning toward the table, was created by you and Richard. Yes. And it has been sitting here while your family struggled. It has not been sitting anywhere. What does that mean? It means the money has a purpose. Rachel lowered her hands. What purpose could possibly matter more than your own family? The words hurt, but I forced myself not to respond from anger. If I allowed Eric to turn the conversation into a fight about loyalty, we would never reach the truth. "This did begin with family," I said. "With your father." Rachel's expression softened at the mention of Richard. I looked down at my hands. They seemed older under the conference room lights. Thin skin, visible veins, a wedding ring I had never removed. "Your father and I did not inherit that money," I continued. "We did not win it, and we did not steal it from anyone who needed it. It began with $12,000 and a machine most people thought would fail." Eric frowned. "What machine?" "Your father worked with medical equipment long before his heart became weak. He had a friend named Samuel Hartwell who was developing a home monitoring device for cardiac patients." Michael remained silent, but I could tell he knew most of the story. Rachel did not. "Samuel believed patients could recover more safely if doctors received daily readings without requiring them to return to the hospital," I said. "This was years before remote medical devices became common. Investors thought the idea was too expensive and too difficult to manage." "But Dad believed him," Rachel said. "Your father understood the problem. He had watched older patients travel hours for appointments that lasted 10 minutes. He had seen families choose between missing work and missing medical care. Richard had come home one evening carrying a gray plastic prototype with loose wires hanging from the back. He placed it on our kitchen table beside a bowl of apples. "This may change everything," he told me. I laughed when I saw it. "It looks like a broken radio." "That's because you lack imagination, and you lack an instruction manual." He kissed my forehead and spent the next hour explaining what Samuel hoped the machine would do. At the time, we had just over $20,000 in savings. That money was supposed to replace our roof and help pay for Rachel's future college expenses. Richard wanted to invest $12,000. I thought he had lost his mind. We argued for 3 days, not bitterly but seriously. I reviewed Samuel's business plan line by line. I checked his estimates. I studied the medical market even though I barely understood the technology. What convinced me was not the promise of profit. It was a handwritten letter from a woman whose husband had died after complications no one detected between appointments. She had told Samuel that families needed a way to know when something was going wrong before it was too late. We invested the money. For almost 10 years, nothing happened. The company survived, but barely. There were regulatory delays, failed prototypes, and months when Richard quietly assumed we would never see our investment again. We replaced our roof with borrowed money. I worked extra hours. We still helped Rachel through college. Then, the technology finally caught up with Samuel's idea. Hospitals began using his devices. A national medical corporation purchased the company. Our $12,000 investment became more valuable than anything Richard and I had ever imagined owning. Rachel stared at me. "How much was it worth when Dad was alive enough that we could have changed our lives completely? Then why didn't you?" I smiled sadly. "Because we liked our life." Eric gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "You expect us to believe you had millions and continued living in that house? That house was our home. You could have traveled, bought property, enjoyed yourself." We did enjoy ourselves. I remembered weekend drives through Southern Ohio church picnics, coffee on the porch, and Richard dancing badly in the kitchen when his health allowed it. Some people believed wealth created happiness because they had never learned to recognize happiness without it. "The money became more important after your father got sick," I said. Rachel's face tightened. "I thought his treatment drained your savings." "We allowed you to think that." "Why?" "Because your father did not want sympathy attached to money." During Richard's years of treatment, I spent countless hours in hospital waiting rooms. I met women whose lives had quietly disappeared into caregiving. One was a 59-year-old school secretary named Gloria. She left her job to care for her husband after a stroke. By the time he died, she had no current references, no savings, and no confidence that anyone would hire her again. Another woman, Marlene, slept in her car outside the hospital because she could not afford both rent and her daughter's cancer medication. There was also June, a widow in her 60s, who had spent 11 years caring for her mother with dementia. After the funeral, her own children told her she should sell her home because she was too old to manage alone. Their stories stayed with me. They had given everything to people they loved. Then the world treated them as though they had done nothing. One evening after a difficult appointment, Richard and I sat in the hospital cafeteria sharing a cup of coffee. He watched a woman at the next table sorting medical bills into piles. "We should do something," he said. "We already donate." I don't mean another check. He wanted to create a program that would help older women train for new careers, pay for temporary caregiving, and receive financial guidance before desperation destroyed their independence. That idea became the foundation of the trust. Richard did not live long enough to see it completed. After his death, I spent nearly 2 years working with Patricia Monroe to create the legal structure. The fund could support approved programs, but it could not be treated like my personal checking account. That was intentional. Richard knew me. He knew that if Rachel called crying, I might empty everything before asking whether money could truly solve her problem. So we built protections against my own weakness. Rachel looked wounded. You created legal restrictions because you thought I would ask for it. Not because of you alone. Her eyes shifted toward Eric. I did not miss it. Then, because of me, he asked. I looked directly at him. You began asking questions about my estate before Richard's funeral flowers had faded. That is not true. You asked whether the house was paid off. I was trying to help. You asked whether Rachel was the beneficiary of my life insurance. That is normal family planning. You asked if I intended to sell my home and move into assisted living. You were grieving. I was 59, healthy, and still working. Rachel turned toward her husband. Did you ask her those things? Eric shrugged. Families discuss estates. Not like that, I said. There were other moments. The time Eric offered to simplify my accounts by combining them with Rachel's. The afternoon he suggested I sign a broad power of attorney before taking a short trip to Florida. The Christmas dinner when he joked that my house was Rachel's future renovation project. Each comment had seemed small enough to excuse. Together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Michael finally spoke. Mrs. Butler's trust is structured according to her instructions and federal law. No family member has an automatic claim to it. Eric's eyes hardened. Rachel is her only child. That changes nothing. Rachel looked at me again. You trusted Michael with this? I trusted the bank. Michael became involved later. Michael cleared his throat. When I first met Mrs. Butler, I was a trainee. I was 26, recently divorced, and raising a little boy. Rachel turned toward him. I could not afford the certification course required for promotion, he continued. I planned to leave banking and take 2 jobs instead. He looked at me. Your mother discovered why I had withdrawn from the program. I remembered that young man clearly. He wore the same 2 shirts every week and ate crackers at his desk because he was saving every dollar for childcare. I paid the tuition, I said. Michael nodded. She told the director it was an anonymous professional development grant. I did not learn the truth until years later. Eric shifted impatiently. What does that have to do with anything? Michael's gaze settled on him. It explains why I know Mrs. Butler's character. She helped me when she had no reason to believe I could ever repay her. Rachel lowered her eyes. The room became quiet again. At last she asked, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me I felt the weight of that question? I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because every time Eric asked about my assets, you defended him. Every time I questioned your spending, you said I was old-fashioned. And every time I helped you, the next crisis became larger. Her mouth trembled. So you thought I was greedy? I thought you had stopped seeing where your choices ended and my responsibility began. Eric pushed back his chair. This conversation is going nowhere. No, I said, it is finally going somewhere. He looked at me with cold anger. I continued before he could interrupt. The money was created from faith patience and your father's belief that ordinary people deserved dignity. It will not be used to hide false signatures, protect reckless decisions, or purchase silence. Rachel closed her eyes. When she opened them, the anger had weakened, but it had not disappeared. You still chose strangers over me? No, I said softly. I chose not to let love become permission. For the first time since we entered the conference room, Rachel had no answer. Eric did. He stood and buttoned his jacket. You are going to regret this when the company collapses. I looked at him and realized his concern was no longer hidden behind charm. He was not afraid of losing a business. He was afraid of what we might discover when it did. Rachel and Eric left the bank before I did. Through the narrow glass panel beside the conference room door, I watched Eric walk ahead of her without once looking back. Rachel followed several steps behind, clutching her purse against her chest as though it were the only thing holding her together. She paused near the lobby entrance. For one brief moment, I thought she might turn around. She did not. Eric pushed open the glass door and they disappeared into the bright afternoon. Michael remained with me while Ashley collected the suspended loan documents. I'm sorry this happened here, he said. You did not bring me into this bank under false pretenses. No, but we should have caught the application earlier. You caught it before I signed. That mattered, a great deal more than I could express. Michael arranged for copies of every document bearing my name. He also advised me not to discuss the account structure with anyone until Patricia reviewed the bank's fraud report. When I finally stepped into the parking lot, Patricia Monroe was waiting beside her silver sedan. I had called her from Michael's office. She wore a navy suit despite the heat, and her silver-streaked hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head. Patricia had represented Richard and me for nearly 20 years. She was not the sort of woman who offered comforting lies. She hugged me once firmly. Then she held me at arm's length. "Are you hurt?" "Not physically." That was not what I asked. I looked toward the empty space where Eric's SUV had been parked. "I don't know yet." Patricia opened the passenger door. "Then let's get you home before you decide." During the drive, I told her everything. Rachel's insult, the false signature, the loan amount, the attempts to access my banking information. Patricia did not interrupt until I mentioned the house. "He listed your residence as secondary collateral." "Yes." "With a forged authorization?" "Yes." Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. "That changes the situation. I thought the forged signature already changed it." "It did. But involving real property means someone may have ordered an appraisal or title review." The idea made my stomach tighten. Can they do that without my permission? They should not be able to complete anything legally without it. But people who begin with one false document rarely stop at one. That sentence followed me all the way home. Patricia had barely placed her briefcase on my kitchen table when her phone rang. She answered, listened for less than a minute, then asked the caller to send everything to her email. "What is it?" I asked when she hung up. "A title monitoring alert." My chair scraped the floor as I sat down. "On my house?" "Yes." She opened her laptop. Several months earlier, Patricia had encouraged me to enroll in a property fraud notification service. At the time, I had laughed and told her no one wanted my modest little house badly enough to steal it. Now a record appeared on her screen. A private appraisal company had requested property information 2 weeks earlier. The request listed Dawson Premier Events as the ordering party. I read the line twice. They already had the house inspected, not inside. It appears to be an external valuation based on public records and photographs, without telling me. Patricia looked at me over the top of her glasses. "This was planned well before Rachel called you." I wanted to defend my daughter. The instinct rose automatically. Perhaps Eric had ordered it. Perhaps Rachel did not know. Perhaps there was some explanation that did not end with my own child helping a man prepare to take my home. But I remembered Rachel's hand resting on the folder. I remembered her saying the house was only secondary collateral. She had known something, maybe not everything, but enough. Patricia reached across the table. "Denise, we need to freeze your credit, revoke any previous financial permissions, and notify the county recorder that no deed-related document should be accepted without direct verification. Do it, and we need to discuss reporting the forgery." My chest tightened. Rachel admitted signing it. Yes, she was manipulated. That may explain her actions. It does not erase them. "I'm not ready to involve the police." Patricia closed the laptop halfway. "I did not say you had to decide this minute. But protecting Rachel from consequences may also protect Eric from discovery." Before I could answer, someone knocked softly at the back door. Not the front. The back. Only family used that entrance. I stood and saw Lily through the glass. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and she wore jeans and an oversized Ohio State sweatshirt despite the heat. I let her in. "Does your mother know you're here?" She shook her head. "Dad took her back to the office." Patricia offered to leave, but Lily glanced at her and said, "You should stay." That frightened me more than anything else had. We sat around the kitchen table. Lily stared at her hands. "Mom told me the loan didn't happen." "That is true," I said. "She said you refused to help." Patricia's expression remained neutral. I kept my voice gentle. "Is that why you came?" "No." Lily swallowed. "I came because they aren't telling you how bad it is." The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. How bad she looked toward the window, checking as if Eric might be standing outside. "People keep calling the house. Clients, vendors, sometimes lawyers. Your mother said they had one difficult contract. It's more than one." Lily explained that Dawson Premier Events had lost several important clients during the previous year. A convention had been canceled after vendors were not paid. 2 weddings had nearly fallen apart because deposits meant for flowers and catering had disappeared. "Dad keeps taking money from new events to finish old ones," she said. Patricia leaned forward. "Did you hear him say that I heard him arguing with Mom?" "What exactly did he say?" Lily closed her eyes, trying to remember. "He said the new deposits would cover the Miller wedding, and then the corporate payment would replace the deposits before anyone noticed." A familiar chill ran through me. It was not merely poor management, it was a collapsing chain. One customer's money was being used to satisfy another customer's obligations. "Does Rachel control the company accounts?" I asked. Lily shook her head. "Dad says Mom is better with clients and he is better with numbers." That almost made me laugh. Eric was better at hiding numbers, not managing them. "How long has this been happening? I don't know." But they started fighting a lot after Christmas. Lily's eyes filled. Mom keeps asking to see the bank statements. Dad tells her she wouldn't understand the financing. The cruelty of it was painfully familiar. Eric had convinced my daughter that I could not understand business. Now, he was telling Rachel the same thing. Patricia asked, "Have you heard him mention your grandmother's property?" Before Lily nodded. "Last week." My heart began to pound. What did he say? He was on the phone in his office. He said, "Once Evelyn—" She stopped. "Once Denise signs, everything disappears." Patricia and I exchanged a look. Everything, I asked. That was the word. Did he say who he was speaking to? No. Lily's voice dropped lower. But later, he told Mom you were too old to understand what the papers meant. The words hurt, though, not because Eric had insulted me. They hurt because Rachel had allowed herself to believe them. He said the bank only cared about assets. Lily continued. He said your house was paid off and you had no reason to keep all that value locked up. Patricia's jaw tightened. Did Rachel agree? She cried. That is not an answer, sweetheart. Lily looked at me. She said she didn't want you to lose the house. I held my breath. And Eric? He said no one would lose anything if she stopped panicking and made you sign. I rose and walked to the sink because I could no longer sit still. Outside, the garden looked exactly as it had that morning. Tomatoes ripened beneath the sun. Basil moved gently in the breeze. Richard's wooden beds stood against the fence. Eric had looked at that home and seen unused value. Rachel had looked at it and seen a solution. Neither of them had seen my life. Patricia came to stand beside me. You understand what this means? Yes, this was not a desperate decision made today. No. They built the loan around your property before asking you. I turned back toward Lily. Does your mother know you came here? No. Can you safely go home? Her face changed. Not fear exactly. Uncertainty. I think so. That answer was not good enough. You'll stay here until I speak to her. Dad will be furious. I'm no longer making decisions based on what keeps Eric calm. Lily's shoulders relaxed for the first time since entering the house. I sent Rachel a message. Come to my house tonight. Alone. We need to talk about the company, the appraisal, and Lily. No more lies. The message showed as delivered. Then read. No response came. 10 minutes later, Lily's phone began vibrating. Eric. She did not answer. It rang again. Then my phone lit up with a message from Rachel. I cannot come. Eric says you are trying to turn Lily and me against him. I read it twice. Patricia watched my face. What did she say? I placed the phone on the table. He found my message before she found her courage. Lily began to cry quietly. I pulled her into my arms. Over her shoulder, I looked at Patricia. I had wanted to believe Rachel was simply frightened, but fear did not make the truth less dangerous. And if Eric was controlling what she knew, what she signed, and whom she was allowed to see, then my daughter was not only helping him deceive me, she might also be trapped inside the very disaster they were trying to hide. Rachel arrived at my house shortly after 10 that night. She came alone. I heard her car stop at the curb, but for almost a full minute, she remained behind the wheel. Through the living room window, I could see her face illuminated by the pale light of her phone. Then the screen went dark. She stepped out, looked over her shoulder, and hurried toward my porch. Lily had fallen asleep upstairs in the guest room. Patricia had gone home only after making me promise to call if Eric appeared. When I opened the door, Rachel looked smaller than she had at the bank. Her cream-colored suit was wrinkled. Her makeup had faded beneath her eyes, and her hair had slipped loose around her face. Is Lily here? She asked. Yes. You should have told me. She asked me not to. I'm her mother, and she was afraid to go home. Rachel flinched. She is not afraid of us. She is afraid of what is happening around her. Rachel stepped inside without waiting to be invited. She glanced toward the staircase, then lowered her voice. You had no right to keep her. She is 17, Rachel. She came to me because she needed somewhere safe. Safe from what I closed the door. You tell me. She walked into the living room and dropped her purse onto the couch. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Richard's photograph stood on the mantel between us. Rachel looked at it, then quickly turned away. Eric thinks you are trying to destroy our marriage. I asked you to come here alone. That is exactly his point. No. His point is that any conversation he cannot control is a threat. You don't know him the way I do. I know he prepared a loan using my home before asking permission. He was desperate. I know he searched for my assets. He thought you might have enough to help. I know he convinced you to sign my name. Rachel's eyes filled with anger. I already admitted that. You admitted one document. What else do you want from me? The truth. I am telling you the truth. Then sit down. She remained standing. I went to the dining table where Patricia and I had arranged copies of the loan application, the asset verification request, The appraisal record and the bank's access report. Rachel stared at the papers. Her face slowly lost color. What is that? The appraisal request for my house. I didn't know about that. It was ordered through your company 2 weeks ago. She picked up the record. Her eyes moved quickly across the page. Eric never showed me this. But you knew the house might be used. He said it was only an emergency backup. An emergency backup is still collateral. He said the bank would never take it. The bank would not need to take it if the loan were repaid. Do you honestly believe your company could repay nearly $1 million? Rachel placed the document down too hard. We have a major contract coming. What contract? She opened her mouth. No answer came. That is what I thought. You want us to fail. The accusation was so familiar that it almost sounded rehearsed. I want you to stop confusing rescue with love. You have no idea what Eric has been carrying. I know he has been using new client deposits to pay old obligations. Her head snapped toward me. Who told you that Lily heard both of you arguing? Rachel glanced toward the staircase. She had no right to listen. She lives in that house. She hears what happens inside it. Rachel began pacing. You don't understand the pressure we are under. Then help me understand. We have employees depending on us. Vendors, clients, our mortgage, Lily's tuition. Her school tuition. Rachel pressed her fingers to her forehead. We are behind. How far I don't know exactly. You run the company. Eric handles the financial side. Then you do not run the company. You represent it. She stopped pacing. That is not fair. Is it untrue? Her silence answered me. I softened my voice. Rachel, I am not asking these questions to humiliate you. I am asking because you signed my name without knowing what your husband was doing. He is my husband. That does not make him honest. He is trying to protect us. By placing me at risk, he didn't think it would come to that. I picked up the false authorization. Then why was my signature already here? Rachel looked at the page but did not touch it. I believed you would agree after we explained. You did not give me the chance to agree. I was scared. And your fear gave you the right to decide for me? No. The word was barely audible. I waited. Rachel sank into one of the dining chairs. I thought it was temporary, she whispered. Eric said once the loan closed, the new contract would bring in enough money to release your house within months. Did you verify that no? Did you see the contract? He showed me parts of it. Did you call the client? He said that would make us look unstable. I sat across from her. Listen to yourself. She covered her face for a moment. Then she looked up and the anger returned, not because she believed she was right, but because she could no longer avoid knowing she had been wrong. You had millions of dollars, she said. Even if something happened to that house, you could buy another one. The room went still. I felt the pain of her words before she seemed to understand them. My home is not replaceable. It is a building. It is where your father and I raised you. I know that. It is where he died. Her mouth closed. It is where I sat beside him through the last night of his life. It is where every ordinary memory I have of our marriage still lives. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You simply did not think I would hear it. Tears gathered in her eyes. You have $3.8 million. You did not know that when you agreed to use my house. The truth landed cleanly. Rachel looked down. At that moment, footsteps sounded on the staircase. Lily stood near the bottom step in her pajamas, her face pale. Mom. Rachel turned. What are you doing awake? I heard you. You should go back upstairs. No. Rachel stared at her. Lily came into the dining room. Why do you always defend Dad when you know something is wrong? You are a child. This is not your responsibility. It became my responsibility when people started calling the house and threatening lawsuits. Rachel looked devastated. You heard those calls? I hear everything. Lily, I heard Dad say Grandma was too old to understand the papers. Rachel shut her eyes. I heard him tell you to make her sign. Stop. And I heard you ask what would happen if she lost the house. Stop. Rachel's voice cracked through the room. Lily began crying. I stood and pulled her close. Rachel pressed both hands against the table, breathing hard. I was trying to keep our family together. Lily wiped her cheeks. Then why does it feel like we are all afraid of him? Before Rachel could answer, headlights swept across the front windows. A car door slammed. Then another. Rachel froze. You told him you were coming here. No. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch. Eric knocked once and opened the door without waiting. He entered with his jaw clenched and his phone in his hand. Rachel. Lily. We're leaving. This is my house, I said. You do not walk in without permission. He ignored me. Get your things. Rachel rose slowly. How did you know I was here? You turned off location sharing too late. Lily moved closer to me. Eric noticed. His expression changed. What have you been telling her? The truth, Lily said. He pointed toward the door. Car. Now. No, Rachel said. The word surprised all of us. Eric turned to her. What I said? No. His voice dropped. You are emotional. We can discuss this at home. We are discussing it here. He looked at the documents on the table, then at me. You think you have won something because the bank mentioned a number? This is not about winning. It is about control. You have always needed Rachel to depend on you. Rachel shook her head. That is not what happened. Eric's eyes remained on me. We need $600,000. Not the full account. A private loan, written agreement, interest, everything legitimate. No, you have not even heard the terms. I have seen enough of your terms. His composure cracked. If you refuse, the company collapses. Then it collapses. Rachel gasped softly. Eric stepped closer. Your daughter loses her home. She may already be losing it. Lily loses her school. That is your responsibility, not mine. People will sue us. They have the right to seek repayment. His face darkened. You would watch your own child lose everything when you could prevent it with one transfer. I will not use Richard's legacy to hide fraud. That is a dramatic word. It is an accurate one. Eric looked toward Rachel. Tell her. Rachel did not move. Tell her what happens if she refuses. Rachel stared at her husband for a long moment. Then she said, maybe she is not the one refusing to face what is happening. Eric's expression became cold. He buttoned his jacket with slow, controlled movements. Fine. He looked at me. When this family falls apart, remember that you had the power to stop it. No, I said. You had the power to stop before you used my daughter, my name, and my home. His eyes flickered. Not guilt, fear. Then he turned and walked out. Rachel did not follow him. Neither did Lily. As his car disappeared down the street, my daughter lowered herself into the chair and began to cry. For the first time, she was no longer crying because I had refused to rescue her. She was crying because she had begun to understand who she had trusted instead. Rachel stayed at my house until almost 2 a.m. For the first hour after Eric left, she barely spoke. She sat at the dining table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never drank, staring at the documents spread before her. Lily returned upstairs, but I knew she was not sleeping. Neither was I. Rachel kept looking at the false signature as though it might change if she stared long enough. I need to go home, she finally said. The word home sounded uncertain. You and Lily can stay here tonight. I can't. Why? Because if I don't go back, Eric will know I've chosen a side. I studied her face. This is not about choosing between your husband and your mother. It will be to him. That answer told me more than she intended. Rachel stood and collected her purse. I need to see the company accounts. Will he let you? He doesn't get to decide anymore. I wanted to believe the strength in her voice. But I had watched Eric control the conversation, the documents, and even the location setting on her phone. Courage announced in a safe room could disappear quickly when the person who inspired fear returned. Take Lily with you, I said. Rachel shook her head. She should stay here. The decision came too quickly. Are you afraid to bring her home? I'm afraid she will hear things she shouldn't. She already has. Rachel looked toward the staircase. I need one night to understand what he has done. I walked her to the porch. Before she stepped outside, I touched her arm. Do not sign anything else. I won't. Do not give him access to your phone. I understand. And if you feel unsafe, leave. She looked at me with tired eyes. Mom, Eric has never hit me. Physical violence is not the only way a person can make you afraid. Her gaze dropped. Then she walked to her car. I watched until her taillights disappeared. The next morning, Rachel went to the Dawson Premier Events office before Eric arrived. She told me later that the building felt different when she entered alone. The framed photographs of luxury weddings, charity galas, and corporate celebrations no longer looked like proof of success. They looked like scenery. Behind them was a company she barely understood. Rachel had always handled clients' creative planning and staff. Eric controlled contracts, payroll, loans, and vendor accounts. Whenever she asked detailed questions, he gave her summaries. Revenue was delayed. A client had not paid. A project would close next month. The numbers were always temporary. The explanations were always almost reassuring. That morning, Rachel used her credentials to open the accounting system. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Vendor invoices, payroll reports, customer deposits. Then she noticed repeated transfers to a company called Buckeye Development Consulting. The name meant nothing to her. The payments did. $48,000, $72,000, $95,000. More than $400,000 had left the company over 14 months. Rachel searched the state business records. Buckeye Development Consulting belonged to Eric's cousin, Travis Dawson. The registered address was a mailbox inside a shipping store. No employees, no website, no evidence of actual consulting work. Rachel called Travis. He did not answer. Minutes later, Eric called her. She stared at his name on the screen before answering. "What are you doing at the office?" he asked. "I work here. You told me you needed space. I needed to review our accounts." Silence. Then his voice softened. "You should have waited for me." "Why?" "Because the financial reports are complicated. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars going to Travis's company." Another pause. "That is related to the development project." "What development project?" "The warehouse conversion." Rachel remembered Eric mentioning an investment opportunity near Dayton. He had described it as separate from their event company. "You used Dawson Premier money. It was a short-term advance. Did the company own part of the project?" "Not directly." "Then why was our money paying for it?" His patience disappeared. "Do not make decisions based on numbers you do not understand." The sentence sounded painfully familiar. It was the same way he had spoken about me. Too old to understand. Too emotional to understand. Too inexperienced to understand. Anyone who questioned Eric simply lacked the ability to understand him. Rachel opened another report. Several transfers carried her electronic approval. She had never seen them. "My name is on these payments. You authorized general operating expenses. I did not authorize payments to Travis. You signed the digital approval policy. That is not the same thing. It is legally sufficient." The words frightened her. Not because she understood the legal meaning, but because Eric sounded prepared. Rachel ended the call. Within minutes, she found more. Deposits from new weddings had been moved into accounts used to pay overdue vendors from older events. Money collected for a September conference had funded a June wedding. A family's payment for a retirement celebration had covered rent on the office. The company was not surviving through profit. It was surviving by moving each new customer's money backward, and every month the gap grew larger. Rachel printed reports until the office printer overheated. By noon, Eric arrived. He did not shout. That was almost worse. He closed the office door and looked at the papers covering her desk. "You are panicking without context." "Then give me context." The real estate project was supposed to generate enough profit to stabilize the company, using client deposits temporarily. The project failed. Didn't it? Eric looked away. That was all the answer she needed. "How much do we owe?" "It depends on how you calculate it." "How much?" "Just over $700,000. Rachel gripped the desk. The loan they had tried to obtain with my house was not meant to fund expansion. It was meant to fill a hole Eric had created. And the nearly $1 million from the bank would have solved the immediate liquidity issue by placing my mother's home at risk. Your mother has millions. We did not know that. Eric's face hardened. We knew she had more than she admitted. Rachel stared at him. How? He did not answer. She remembered the bank's report showing attempts to access my assets. You searched for her money. I conducted responsible due diligence on my mother for our family. No, for yourself. Eric stepped closer. You signed the documents too. The sentence was quiet and deliberate. Rachel felt its meaning immediately. If this becomes a legal problem, he continued, your name is on the company. Your signature is on the authorization. You told the bank Denise intended to support us. Because you told me to. Can you prove that Rachel's fear must have shown because Eric smiled sadly? We need each other, he said. That is why you should stop listening to your mother. While Rachel confronted him, Patricia and I spent the morning protecting what remained untouched. We froze my credit reports. We filed an identity theft warning with the bank. Patricia prepared notices revoking any financial authorization that might have been created in my name. By afternoon, my phone began ringing. The first caller refused to identify himself. Your family owes people money, he said. Then speak to the people who borrowed it. You're sitting on millions while they hide. I ended the call. The second message was more direct. Pay the family debt before everyone learns what your daughter did. Patricia saved each number and message. They are trying to frighten you into paying, she said. It is working. Fear is not the same as surrender. That evening, Michael called. His voice was unusually tense. We stopped another request connected to your profile. What kind of request? A proposed transfer from Dawson Premier Events into an account linked to your name. That makes no sense. It was not designed to move real money, he explained. It appears intended to create a record showing you had financially participated in the company. My stomach tightened. Why would someone do that if creditors sued? They could argue that you were an investor or financial partner. So they could come after me. Potentially. I looked at Patricia. She had heard enough from the other side of the room to understand. Who submitted it, I asked. We are still tracing the origin, but it used company credentials and included another copy of your electronic signature. I closed my eyes. The loan had failed. Now someone was trying to rewrite the past to make it look as though I had already chosen to be involved. Michael continued. Mrs. Butler, this is no longer only an attempt to obtain your assets. I know. They may be preparing to place responsibility on you. After the call ended, Patricia stood beside my kitchen table. You cannot delay reporting this much longer. I looked toward the staircase where Lily was doing homework in the guest room. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Rachel appeared. I found where the money went. Eric used company funds for a private real estate project. Transfers were approved with my electronic signature. I did not authorize them. A second message followed. He says there is no way I can prove it was him. I read both messages twice. My daughter had helped Eric place my home at risk. But now I understood the larger trap. He had used her name the same way they had used mine. The difference was that Rachel had once trusted him enough to hand him the tools. And unless she acted quickly, Eric was preparing to leave both of us standing beneath the wreckage he had created. Rachel arrived at Patricia's office the next morning, carrying a cardboard file box against her chest. She had covered the company logo with strips of gray tape. It was a small gesture, but I understood it. Dawson Premier Events had once represented everything she wanted people to believe about her life success. Elegance control. Now she could not bear to look at the name. Patricia's office occupied the second floor of an old brick building near downtown Columbus. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish. Framed law degrees hung beside photographs of Patricia standing with local judges and nonprofit leaders. Rachel stopped when she saw me. You came? You asked me to. She looked tired enough to have aged several years overnight. Her eyes were swollen, and she wore the same black pants she had worn the day before. Patricia opened the conference room door. Bring the box inside. Rachel placed it on the table. What exactly did you take? Patricia asked. Copies, Rachel said quickly. I didn't remove originals. That was wise. I printed bank statements, transfer reports, vendor records, and emails. Some of the files were locked, so I photographed the screen. Did Eric see you? He knows I reviewed the accounts. He doesn't know I copied everything. Patricia sat at the head of the table. Before we begin, I need you to understand that I represent Denise. I do not represent you. Rachel nodded. If your interests conflict with your mother's, my legal duty is to protect her. I understand. You should obtain your own attorney. I can't afford one. That does not change the need. Rachel looked at me. In the past, that look would have been enough. I would have offered money before she asked. I would have called someone, written a check, and told myself I was protecting my daughter. This time, I remained silent. Patricia opened the box and removed the first stack of documents. We will discuss legal resources later. For now, tell us everything from the beginning. Rachel pressed her palms together. Eric started talking about a loan around Christmas. He said the company had temporary cash flow problems because clients were paying late. Did you review the accounts then? Patricia asked. No, why not? He told me to focus on bookings and staff. Patricia's tone remained even. And you accepted that? Yes. Rachel looked ashamed. I wanted to believe him. Continue. In February, he said we needed a larger credit line. The bank asked for more collateral because our house already had a second mortgage. I stared at her. A second mortgage? Rachel nodded. I signed it last year. Did you know why? He said it was for business expansion. But it went into the real estate project, Patricia said. I think so. Rachel pulled out several printed transfers. These payments went to Buckeye Development Consulting. Some were approved using my digital signature. Did you share your password with Eric? Yes. Patricia removed her glasses. Why? He said married business partners shouldn't hide passwords from each other. And did he share his? Rachel's silence answered. Patricia replaced her glasses. Tell me about the documents involving Denise. Rachel's hands began trembling. The first one was the appraisal authorization. My chest tightened, despite already knowing about it. Eric told me the lender needed permission to estimate the value of Mom's house. He said it wasn't a commitment. You signed my name, I said. Yes, without asking. Yes. She did not defend herself. That was new. The second document, she continued, was a letter saying Mom intended to make an investment in Dawson Premier Events. Patricia stopped writing. An investment of how much? It didn't list a final amount. It said up to $750,000. I felt cold. Where is that document? Rachel reached into the box and handed Patricia a copy. My name appeared at the bottom, another imitation of my signature. I looked at Rachel. You signed this one too? Yes. Her voice broke. Eric said it was only to reassure the lender while we completed the loan package. You represented that I intended to invest $750,000. I know, Rachel. You know now. Did you know then? She began crying. I knew it was wrong. I just kept telling myself we would explain everything before it became official. Patricia placed the paper flat on the table. Submitting a false statement to influence a financial institution is serious. Your cooperation may matter, but it does not erase your role. Rachel wiped her cheeks. Am I going to prison? The question hung between us. Patricia did not soften the truth. I cannot predict that. You participated in document fraud. The extent of your exposure will depend on what was submitted, what losses occurred, what you knew, and whether you cooperate fully. Rachel's breathing became uneven. What happens to Lily if I'm charged? She is 17, I said gently. That doesn't mean she doesn't need me. No one said she doesn't. What if Eric gets custody? Patricia leaned forward. Then your best protection is not hiding evidence. It is creating a complete record of what happened. Rachel nodded, but fear still filled her face. I need to tell you about the third document. Patricia waited. Rachel reached into her purse rather than the box. She removed a folded packet and placed it before me. The first page carried the title, Temporary Financial Power of Attorney. My name appeared as the principal. Rachel's appeared as the appointed agent. For several seconds, I could not speak. What is this? It hasn't been filed. That is not what I asked. Eric had it prepared. Why? He said we might need access to your accounts if you became confused during the loan process. I stared at my daughter. Confused? He said if you refused after agreeing, the bank might question whether you understood the consequences. I never agreed. I know. Patricia scanned the document. This grants broad authority over bank accounts, investments, property, and legal claims. I didn't sign your name on it, Rachel said quickly. But you considered it. She looked down. I kept it. Why? At first because Eric told me to. Later because I was afraid he would find another way to use it. Patricia turned to the final pages. This is not the only thing he prepared. Rachel nodded. He talked about guardianship. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. What exactly did he say? He said if you refused to cooperate, we could petition the court for temporary financial guardianship. On what basis? Rachel's tears returned. He said we could show that you were becoming forgetful. The room seemed to tilt. I am not forgetful. I know. Did you tell him that? At first, Rachel covered her mouth. Patricia's voice became sharper. What did you do? Rachel forced herself to answer. Eric asked me to start mentioning small incidents to relatives. What incidents? I asked. That you had missed appointments, that you forgot to pay bills, that you repeated questions. None of those things had happened. Not once. Who did you tell Aunt Susan? Cousin Laura. 2 people from church. I could barely recognize my own voice. You told people I was losing my mind, he said. We needed a record showing the concerns began before the loan. Patricia sat back. This was not desperation. This was preparation. Rachel nodded miserably. He even told me to photograph expired food in your refrigerator. I remembered her visit 2 months earlier. She had opened cabinets, checked labels, and asked whether I was eating properly. I had believed she cared. You were collecting evidence against me. I never sent the pictures, but you took them. Yes. A deep grief settled over me. The forged signature threatened my money. The guardianship plan threatened my personhood. They had been preparing to turn my age into a weapon. Patricia gathered the documents into a separate pile. This must be reported. Rachel looked terrified. Can we wait until I find proof that Eric directed it? We already have patterns, Patricia said, but direct evidence would strengthen your position. There is more in his office. What kind of evidence he keeps is safe behind the bookshelf? Contracts, backup, drives, copies of identification. He thinks I don't know the code. You are not going back there, I said. Rachel looked at me. I have to. No. If we report now, he'll destroy everything. Then investigators can obtain records legally. Not before he deletes them or leaves. Patricia considered this. Do you know whether the guardianship petition was filed numb? Could it have been? I don't think so. He was waiting until the loan failed. Patricia stood and walked toward the window. We have 2 choices. Report what we have immediately or preserve more evidence before alerting him. Rachel wiped her face. I can go home, act as if I'm still with him, and get into the safe. You are not trained for this, Patricia said. I know the house. I know his routines, and if he discovers you, he won't. I heard the same false confidence I had once used when promising Richard that Rachel would eventually learn from being rescued. I reached across the table and took my daughter's hand. You do not have to prove your regret by putting yourself in danger. I'm not doing this to earn forgiveness. Then why? Because my name is on those documents. Because I helped him hurt you. And because Lily deserves to know that when I finally saw the truth, I did not look away again. Her hand trembled beneath mine. I wanted to forbid her. I wanted to take control the way mothers sometimes do when fear disguises itself as love. But Rachel had surrendered her judgment to Eric for too long. She needed to make a choice of her own. Patricia returned to the table. If you go back, you copy documents. You do not confront him. You send everything immediately. If anything feels wrong, you leave. Rachel nodded. And you tell no one where the copies are stored. Patricia continued. I understand. She closed the file box. The decision had been made. Rachel would return to the home she no longer trusted and search the office of the man she had once defended against everyone. As she stood to leave, I noticed something in her face. It was not confidence. It was fear finally moving in the direction of courage. But courage did not guarantee safety. And as I watched my daughter walk out of Patricia's office, I could not escape the feeling that Eric already knew she had stopped believing him. Rachel returned to the house she shared with Eric shortly after noon. Before she left Patricia's office, she had removed the copies from the cardboard box and placed them in Patricia's locked filing cabinet. She carried only her purse and a folder containing harmless vendor schedules. The goal was simple. She had to make Eric believe she had come home to repair their marriage. Nothing about it felt simple. When Rachel entered through the garage, the house was silent. Eric's SUV was gone, but his coffee cup sat in the kitchen sink and one of his suit jackets had been thrown across a chair. She texted me immediately. I'm inside. He isn't here. Patricia had instructed her not to send details after that. If Eric checked her phone, even an innocent message could expose everything. Rachel placed her purse on the counter and walked slowly through the house. For 17 years, that place had represented the life she thought she wanted. High ceilings, white marble counters, family portraits taken by professional photographers, furniture selected to impress guests rather than comfort the people who lived there. Now every room felt staged. Even the framed wedding photograph in the hallway seemed dishonest. Eric's hand rested at her waist, his smile confident and warm. Rachel remembered believing that smile meant safety. She went upstairs and changed into casual clothes. Then she unpacked a small overnight bag, placing each item back into the closet so Eric would believe she intended to stay. At 1:30, the garage door opened. Rachel's heart began pounding. Eric entered carrying a brown envelope and a set of car keys she did not recognize. He stopped when he saw her. You came back. I needed time. His expression softened. I knew your mother would eventually push too far. Rachel forced herself not to react. She said things I didn't want to hear. She enjoys making you feel guilty. Maybe. Eric stepped closer. Where is Lily with Mom? His jaw tightened. You should bring her home. She needs a night away from this. From us. From the arguments. Eric studied her face. Then he placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. We may need to leave Ohio for a while. Rachel looked at him. What does that mean? I have an opportunity in Florida. A development group near Tampa needs someone with my experience. You found a new job overnight? It's been under discussion for months. Why didn't you tell me? Because there was no reason to worry you until it became real. The phrase sounded familiar. No reason to worry you. Eric used it whenever he had already made a decision without her. When would we leave? Within a few days. Rachel stared at him. What about the company? We let the attorneys handle it. And the clients? They will file claims. The employees? They will find other jobs. What about the money you transferred? His eyes narrowed. You said you came home to talk about our marriage. I did. Then stop interrogating me like your mother. Rachel lowered her gaze before he could see the anger in it. You're right. I'm tired. Eric touched her shoulder. We both are. His fingers felt heavy. We can start over, he said. You, me, and Lily. Once we are away from Denise's influence, things will become clear again. Rachel managed a small nod. Maybe. That answer satisfied him more than it should have. At 2:15, Eric left to meet someone he described as a private lender. He said he would return before 4. Rachel waited at the kitchen window until his SUV disappeared. Then she moved. Eric's office was at the end of the upstairs hallway. A dark wooden bookcase covered most of one wall. Behind it, mounted inside a recessed cabinet, was a digital safe. Rachel had learned the code months earlier after watching Eric enter it. Lily's birthday. Not because he was sentimental, because he believed no one would suspect him of using something so obvious. Rachel typed the 6 digits. The lock clicked. Inside were 3 shelves packed with folders, external drives, passports, and cash. For a moment, she could only stare. Then she photographed everything before touching it. The first folder contained copies of my driver's license, social security card, property deed, tax records, and insurance documents. Some of those records could be found publicly. Others could not. Rachel photographed each page and sent the images to a secure upload link Patricia had created. The next folder was labeled Butler Capacity Review. Rachel's hands began to shake. Inside was a draft petition requesting temporary financial guardianship over me. The document described me as an elderly widow suffering from progressive confusion. It claimed I had missed utility payments, become lost while driving, left the stove burning, repeated questions during conversations. None of it was true. Beside each invented incident was a date. Eric had been constructing a timeline. He had even listed Rachel as the concerned daughter, seeking protection for her vulnerable mother. A separate page contained names of possible witnesses. Aunt Susan, Cousin Laura, 2 church members Rachel had casually told that I seemed forgetful. Those conversations had not been harmless. Eric had designed them to become testimony. Rachel covered her mouth to keep from making a sound. She photographed every page. The third folder contained contracts from Dawson Premier Events. Some showed customer deposits redirected through Buckeye Development Consulting. Others included altered payment schedules and vendor invoices for services never performed. There was also a handwritten list of clients. Besides several names, Eric had written how long he believed they could be delayed before taking legal action. He had not lost control of the company by accident. He had been calculating how long each person could be deceived. Rachel found copies of 3 airline reservations from Columbus to Tampa. Eric's name appeared on one. Rachel's appeared on another. The third was for Lily. The flights departed in 2 days. He had already decided for them. On the lowest shelf sat a small black external hard drive. Rachel connected it to Eric's office computer. The drive contained financial records, scanned signatures, email backups, and folders named after creditors. She copied everything onto Patricia's secure server. The transfer time read 18 minutes. Rachel watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 30%, 42, 58. Every sound in the house seemed louder. The refrigerator downstairs, a car passing outside, the air conditioning system switching on. At 71%, the office door opened. Lily stood there. Rachel nearly screamed. "What are you doing here?" Lily held up a house key. "Grandma was on a call with Ms. Monroe. I knew you came back. You cannot be here. I came to help. You need to leave now." Lily looked at the open safe. "Is that Grandma's file?" Rachel nodded. Lily entered and closed the door. "Dad's office camera saves to the old desktop." "What camera?" "The one he installed after someone broke into the company warehouse. He connected the office security system here so he could review footage." Rachel stared at her. "Does it record this room?" "Not this room. The company office." Lily moved to the old computer beneath the window. After several attempts, she opened a security program. Archived video files appeared by date. Rachel remembered signing the false documents in Eric's company office. If the camera had been recording, it might show exactly what he had told her. "Copy everything," she said. The hard drive transfer reached 100%. Lily connected a second drive and began exporting the security archive. Then the garage door opened. Both of them froze. "He wasn't supposed to be back yet," Rachel whispered. Footsteps sounded downstairs. Eric called her name. Rachel closed the safe, but the folder containing my guardianship petition was still on the desk. There was no time to replace it properly. Eric's steps climbed the staircase. Lily removed the external drive and slipped it beneath her sweatshirt. Rachel pushed the false documents into a drawer. The office door opened. Eric stood in the doorway. His eyes moved from Rachel to Lily, then to the bookcase. The safe door was closed, but one corner of the hidden cabinet remained visible. "What are you doing?" he asked. Rachel stepped between him and Lily. "I know everything." Eric's expression did not change immediately. That was what frightened her most. He entered the room and closed the door behind him. "You should have left this alone. You forged approvals in my name. You gave me access. You stole client money. I moved funds to protect the business. You prepared a guardianship petition against my mother." His gaze shifted toward the desk. "You opened the safe. Yes, you have no idea what you've done. For the first time, I do." Eric looked at Lily. "Give me the drive." She moved behind Rachel. "No." His voice remained calm. "Lily, this is an adult matter. You made it my matter when you used my school to scare Mom." Rachel held out one arm protecting her daughter. "We are leaving." Eric laughed once. "You think you can walk away and blame everything on me. I have copies. And I have your signatures. You told me what to sign. Prove it." Rachel glanced toward Lily. Eric saw the movement. His face changed. "What did you take?" Neither answered. He stepped closer, but Rachel did not move. If you try to make this physical, she said, we will scream loud enough for every neighbor to hear. Eric stopped. He had always cared about appearances. Even then, reputation restrained him more effectively than conscience. He pointed toward Rachel. The company is in your name. The bank forms carry your signature. The clients dealt with you. When this ends, you will be the one charged. Then I will tell the truth. You will lose Lily. Rachel's face tightened. I will tell the court you are unstable, that you exposed her to financial crimes, that you turned her against her father. Lily stepped forward. I saw what you did. Eric looked at his daughter as though she had become another enemy. Rachel picked up her purse. Come on, Lily. Eric moved aside, but his voice followed them into the hallway. If you walk out that door, there is no coming back. Rachel stopped at the top of the stairs. She looked back at the man she had defended, obeyed, and trusted with every part of her life. Then she said, That is the first honest thing you've told me. They left with one bag of clothes, the copied records, and the hard drive hidden beneath Lily's sweatshirt. Eric stood in the doorway as Rachel's car pulled away. He did not chase them. He did not need to. His threat traveled with them. Rachel knew her signatures were real. She knew her mistakes could not be erased. But for the first time, Eric no longer controlled the only version of the truth. And inside the drive Lily held against her chest might be the evidence that decided which of them would carry the blame. Patricia arranged the meeting for the following Monday morning. She chose a private conference room inside the regional banking office rather than her own law firm. The location was neutral, secure, and large enough for everyone who needed to attend. By 9 o'clock, the long table was surrounded by people whose decisions could change our lives. Michael sat beside two members of the bank's fraud investigation team. Across from them was a lawyer specializing in business bankruptcy. Patricia sat to my right with Rachel and Lily beside her. Rachel had obtained a separate attorney through an emergency legal assistance program Patricia recommended. His name was Jonathan Price, a quiet man in his early 60s who had spent most of the weekend reviewing her records. No one spoke casually. There was no coffee table conversation or polite discussion about the weather. Boxes of documents lined the walls. Printed banking reports were arranged in numbered folders. Lily's external hard drive sat inside a clear evidence bag near the center of the table. Rachel looked exhausted. She had spent the previous 2 nights in my guest room, waking whenever a car slowed outside the house. Eric had sent more than 30 messages. Some begged her to come home. Some accused her of destroying their family. Others warned that she would be the one arrested. Jonathan had instructed her not to respond. At 9:15, the door opened. Eric entered with an attorney I recognized from advertisements on local television. His name was Charles Merritt, and he had a reputation for defending wealthy business owners accused of financial misconduct. Eric wore a dark blue suit and a calm expression. If I had not known what was hidden inside his safe, I might have believed he was the most reasonable person in the room. He glanced at Rachel, then Lily, then me. His eyes revealed nothing. Charles placed a leather briefcase on the table. My client has agreed to participate voluntarily, he said. That should not be interpreted as an admission of wrongdoing. Patricia folded her hands. No one suggested otherwise. The lead fraud investigator, a woman named Karen Wallace, began the meeting. She explained that the bank was reviewing false documents connected to the attempted commercial loan, unauthorized access to my financial profile, and a fabricated record suggesting I had invested in Dawson Premier Events. She turned toward Rachel. Mrs. Dawson, do you understand that providing false information during this interview may affect any consideration given to your cooperation? Yes. Rachel's voice shook, but she did not look away. Did you sign Denise Butler's name on banking documents? Yes. How many 3 documents were prepared? I signed 2. I kept the 3rd without signing it. She explained the appraisal authorization and the false investment letter. She admitted that she knew signing my name was wrong even though Eric had told her the documents were preliminary. No one rescued her from the shame of that admission. Not Jonathan, not Patricia, not me. For the first time in her life, Rachel was telling the truth without expecting someone else to soften it. When she finished, Charles opened his briefcase. My client disputes her account. Eric leaned back in his chair. He looked almost disappointed in Rachel. Dawson Premier Events was Rachel's company, he said. She handled client relationships, company branding, and financial commitments. You controlled the accounting system, Rachel replied. I managed the reports you approved. You used my digital signature. You provided the password. Jonathan touched Rachel's arm, reminding her not to argue. Charles distributed a set of printed emails. These communications demonstrate that Mrs. Dawson actively pursued financing using her mother's assets. One email carried Rachel's address and included the sentence, "My mother will support the company once she understands how serious the situation is." I saw Rachel's face change. I wrote that she whispered. Eric looked at her. Yes, you did. Another email appeared to show Rachel asking Eric to schedule the appraisal before I changed my mind. A third stated that I had become forgetful and might need help managing financial decisions. My stomach turned. Some of those words were undeniably Rachel's. Jonathan reviewed the pages. "Are these complete email chains?" Charles smiled thinly. "They are the relevant communications." That was not my question. Karen requested digital copies with full metadata. Charles agreed, though he did not look pleased. Still, the damage had been done. The printed emails made Rachel appear less like a manipulated wife and more like a willing participant who had changed her story only after the bank rejected the loan. Karen looked at her. "Did you write these messages?" "Parts of them." Which parts I told Eric Mom would probably help once we explained. I also said she was stubborn. "What about the statement that she was becoming forgetful?" Rachel lowered her eyes. "I wrote that after Eric told me we needed to document concerns. So you knowingly created a false record?" "Yes." Eric's expression remained calm. Charles continued. "My client did not forge Mrs. Butler's signature. Mrs. Dawson has admitted she did. My client did not own Dawson Premier Events alone. Mrs. Dawson was its public face and legal officer. She benefited from every business expense and every attempt to obtain financing. For several terrible minutes, the room seemed to tilt in Eric's favor. The signatures were Rachel's. The company carried her name. The emails came from her account. Even the false concerns about my memory had been repeated in her own words." Rachel began breathing too quickly. Jonathan whispered for her to remain calm. She looked at me with panic in her eyes. I thought of every time I had protected her from discomfort, every time I had stepped between her and a consequence. This time I could not make the evidence disappear. I could only remain beside her while the truth was examined. Then Lily spoke. "The camera." Everyone turned toward her. Karen's expression softened slightly. "What camera?" "The security camera in Dad's company office. The files are on the drive." Eric's head moved sharply. For the first time, his composure cracked. Charles leaned toward him. They whispered urgently. The technical investigator connected Lily's drive to a secure laptop. It took several minutes to organize the archive by date. Lily remembered the afternoon Rachel had signed the asset verification form. They opened the recording. The video showed Eric's office from an upper corner. There was no audio at first, only Rachel sitting at the desk while Eric stood beside her. Then, the investigator enabled a second track. Sound filled the conference room. Eric's recorded voice was unmistakable. "Sign Denise's name here. The bank just needs something to begin the review." Rachel's voice followed. "What if Mom says no?" "She won't once the loan is ready. By then, refusing would hurt Lily too." The recording continued. Rachel asked whether my house could be taken. Eric answered, "Not if everything goes according to plan." "Stop thinking emotionally." No one moved. The video did not erase Rachel's guilt, but it proved Eric had directed the act he now claimed was hers alone. Another recording showed him preparing the false investment letter. A third captured a conversation with an unidentified man. "If Denise refuses," Eric said on the video, "we establish that she's confused. Rachel has already started mentioning the memory problems." The other man asked whether a judge would believe it. Eric laughed. "She'll look confused enough in court. She always freezes when people talk over her." My hands turned cold. Eric had studied not only my finances, but my behavior. He had mistaken my patience for weakness. Karen paused the recording. Charles stood. "We need a private conference." "No," Eric said. His lawyer looked at him sharply. Eric's face was red. "That recording is incomplete." Rachel knew the plan. Rachel stared at him. "You said there was no plan. You were part of every decision. You told me the papers were temporary. And you signed them." Michael opened a banking report. The digital submission originated from a device assigned to Mr. Dawson's company credentials. The login time matches the timestamp on this recording. Another investigator placed records on the screen. The unauthorized searches of my assets had also been conducted through Eric's administrative account. Charles tried to interrupt. Eric spoke over him. "I was protecting my family. Rachel could not manage the company. Denise refused to help even though she had more money than she could ever use." Karen looked directly at him. "So, you believed Mrs. Butler's refusal justified submitting false documents?" "That is not what I said. You just said she refused to help. She was being manipulated by that lawyer." Patricia did not react. Eric pointed toward Rachel. "She wanted the money too. She called her mother useless because Denise had never done anything for us." Rachel began crying, but this time she did not collapse. She sat straighter. "Yes," she said. "I called my mother useless. I signed her name. I repeated lies about her memory. I did those things and I will accept the consequences." She looked at Eric. "But I will not accept yours too." The room became silent. Karen closed the main file. She informed Eric that the evidence would be referred for investigation involving bank fraud, identity theft, falsification of financial records, misuse of customer deposits, and conspiracy to obtain control over my property through a fraudulent guardianship claim. Charles immediately instructed Eric to stop speaking. The meeting ended shortly afterward. No one was arrested in the room. There was no dramatic pair of handcuffs, only investigators collecting documents and attorneys discussing the next legal steps. But as Eric stood to leave, he looked at Rachel with pure hatred. "You think this saves you?" Rachel wiped her face. "No," she said. "Telling the truth does not erase what I did." Then she reached for Lily's hand. "It only stops you from deciding what the truth is." Eric left without another word. Rachel remained seated long after the door closed. She was not innocent. She was not safe from consequences. And she still did not know whether the law or her own mother would ever fully forgive her. But the lie that had controlled all of us was finally broken. For the first time, every person in that room had seen Eric exactly as he was. The first criminal charges against Eric were filed 3 weeks after the meeting at the bank. There were no cameras outside the courthouse when it happened, no dramatic news conference, just a formal document entered into the county system listing accusations that sounded colder than the damage they had caused. Bank fraud, identity theft, falsification of financial records, misuse of customer funds, conspiracy to obtain control over another person's property through fraudulent claims of incapacity. Eric was released while the case continued, but the court ordered him to surrender his passport and stay away from Rachel, Lily, and me. By then, Dawson Premier Events had already collapsed. The office doors were locked. Employees arrived one Monday morning to find a notice from the bankruptcy attorney taped inside the glass. The company website disappeared 2 days later. Clients began filing claims almost immediately. Some had lost wedding deposits. Others had paid for retirement dinners, anniversary parties, and charity events that would never happen. One woman had used money from her late father's life insurance to pay for her daughter's reception. She called Rachel crying, asking whether any of it could be recovered. Rachel sat at my kitchen table during that call. I watched her listen without interrupting. When the woman finished, Rachel said, "I cannot promise when you will be repaid, but I am going to give the bankruptcy court everything I know." There was no excuse in her voice, no mention of Eric manipulating her, no attempt to make herself sound innocent. Afterward, she went into the bathroom and cried for nearly 20 minutes. Facing consequences was different from understanding them. For years, Rachel had measured business failure in numbers: lost contracts, unpaid invoices, damaged reputation. Now those numbers had faces. Jonathan negotiated with investigators on her behalf. Her cooperation mattered. So did the evidence she had provided and the fact that she had admitted her actions before prosecutors confronted her with every document. But none of that erased what she had done. Rachel had signed my name. She had repeated false claims about my memory. She had helped create the appearance that I intended to invest in a failing company. The final agreement required her to accept civil responsibility, complete hundreds of hours of community service, attend a financial ethics program, and contribute part of her future income toward restitution. She avoided prison. When Jonathan delivered the news, Rachel did not celebrate. She sat quietly in Patricia's office and asked, "How much do the clients get back?" "Not enough." Jonathan answered, "That was the truth." Their large house entered foreclosure because of the mortgages Eric had hidden behind the appearance of success. The black SUV was repossessed from the driveway. Furniture, electronics, and jewelry purchased through company accounts became part of the bankruptcy review. Rachel and Lily moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of Columbus. The apartment was clean but small. The kitchen had peeling cabinet doors, and Lily's bedroom window faced a brick wall. The first evening I visited, Rachel apologized for the folding chair she offered me. "I haven't bought a dining set yet." "You do not need to apologize for a chair." She looked around the room. "I used to spend more on flowers for one event than this apartment costs for a month. And did those flowers make you feel safe?" "No." Her answer came without hesitation. Lily adjusted more easily than her mother did. She hung string lights around her bedroom, placed photographs above her desk, and announced that the smaller space meant she could reach everything without standing up. Rachel smiled at the joke, but later I found her alone in the kitchen staring at an overdue utility notice. I could have paid it. The amount was insignificant compared with what sat inside the trust. Even outside the restricted account, I had enough personal savings to solve many of her immediate problems. My hand nearly reached for my checkbook. Then I remembered Richard's hospital room. "Do not give them everything because you are afraid they will stop loving you." I paid the required deposit to ensure Lily had safe housing. I bought groceries during the first week. I helped my granddaughter replace a school laptop that Eric had taken. But I did not pay Rachel's legal obligations. I did not rescue her credit. I did not replace the car or the furniture. And I did not use the trust to repay the customers her company had harmed. Word of my decision traveled quickly through the family. My sister-in-law Susan called first. I heard Rachel is sleeping on a used mattress. She has a bed. You know what I mean. I am not sure I do. You have millions of dollars. The money is held for a specific purpose. She is your daughter. She is also an adult who participated in fraud. Susan lowered her voice as if protecting Rachel from a truth she already knew. Eric manipulated her. Yes. Then why are you punishing her? I am not punishing her. I am refusing to erase the consequences. Other relatives followed. Cousin Laura said people at church were talking. An uncle I had not heard from in 6 years left a message telling me money had made me cold. The irony was almost unbearable. They had believed I was simple and insignificant when they thought I had little. Now that they knew I had money, they believed every family problem belonged to me. I invited the closest relatives to my house the following Sunday. Patricia advised against discussing details of the ongoing case, so I did not. I served iced tea and peach cobbler while everyone settled into the living room. Susan began before I had even sat down. We are only here because we care about the family. Then, listen before deciding what care should look like. I opened a small notebook. Inside were records of the help Richard and I had provided Rachel over the years, her college expenses, the hospital bills after Lily's birth, the down payment on her first house, the money used to cover payroll during her company's early crisis, the land we had sold. I did not share the amounts to embarrass her. I shared them because silence had allowed everyone to imagine that I had watched my daughter struggle without ever lifting a hand. I helped Rachel repeatedly, I said. I did it privately because I did not want gratitude to become a debt between us. Susan looked uncomfortable. Then why stop now? Because help that prevents growth can become another form of harm. She may lose everything. She has already lost many things, and you can restore them. No, I can purchase replacements. That is not the same as restoring her judgment, her honesty, or the trust she damaged. Laura folded her arms. That sounds harsh. It feels harsh because women are often taught that love means making ourselves available for unlimited use. The room became quiet. I can forgive my daughter and still protect my home. I can love her and still refuse to pay debts created through deception. I can understand that she was manipulated and still acknowledge that she made choices. A voice came from the hallway. She is right. Rachel stood near the entrance. I had not heard her arrive. Lily was beside her. Everyone turned. Rachel stepped into the living room. My mother is not abandoning me, she said. She is doing what she should have done years ago. Susan began to object, but Rachel raised one hand. No. Please let me finish. She looked around the room. I called her useless because she would not sign away her house. I acted as though she had never helped me, when the truth is that I built much of my life on sacrifices she never mentioned. Her voice shook. She paid bills I thought had disappeared on their own. She protected me from failure so often that I began to think protection was something I was owed. No one spoke. Rachel looked at me. I do not deserve access to her money because I am her daughter, and she should not have to prove she loves me by saving me from what I did. Tears filled my eyes, but I did not look away. Susan lowered her gaze. The conversation ended soon afterward. Some relatives understood. Others left believing I had become selfish. I could live with that. What I did not yet know was whether I could live with the distance between Rachel and me. 2 days later, she began her community service at a women's resource center. Her first assignment was organizing donated clothing and helping clients complete employment forms. That evening, she called me. I met a woman who sold her house to pay her son's debts, she said. Now he will not let her live with him. I closed my eyes. I am sorry. She kept saying she should have been a better mother. Rachel's voice broke. I heard myself in the way her son spoke about her. I did not rush to comfort her. Some realizations needed room to hurt. Mom, she whispered, I know saying sorry does not fix anything. No, it does not. Are you ever going to forgive me? I looked at Richard's photograph on the mantel. I am trying to understand what forgiveness will require. She was silent for a moment. That is fair. It was the first time Rachel had accepted an answer from me that did not give her what she wanted. I'll keep doing the work, she said. After we ended the call, I stood alone in my living room. Justice had begun. Eric was facing the law. Rachel was facing the people harmed by her choices. My home and financial independence were protected. But justice did not return the daughter I had trusted. It did not remove the memory of her signing my name or calling me useless. Healing I was beginning to understand would not arrive as one grand act of forgiveness. It would come slowly if it came at all through every honest choice Rachel made when no one was there to rescue her. 6 months after Rachel began her community service, the Richard Butler Second Chance Fund opened its doors. The center occupied a renovated brick building on the east side of Columbus. It had once been a neighborhood library, and I loved that history. A place built to hold books and quiet possibilities would now hold women who believed their own stories had already ended. Patricia helped negotiate the lease. Michael guided us through the financial requirements. I worked with career counselors, social workers, and local community colleges to design programs that offered more than one-time checks. The fund would provide vocational scholarships for women over 50, temporary caregiving assistance, financial counseling, and support for those returning to work after years spent caring for relatives. I insisted that every applicant be treated with dignity. No one would be required to perform their suffering to prove they deserved help. No one would be spoken to as though age had made them incapable. And no woman would be told that sacrificing for her family meant surrendering the right to rebuild her own life. The morning of the opening ceremony, I arrived before sunrise. The center was still quiet. Fresh paint scented the hallway, and rows of empty chairs faced a small platform in the main room. Volunteers had arranged simple flowers on the tables. Nothing imported, nothing extravagant. Daisies, sunflowers, and green branches from a local florist who had donated her time. Above the reception desk hung a framed photograph of Richard. He was standing in our old backyard laughing at something outside the camera's view. His sleeves were rolled up and there was dirt on one knee of his jeans. It was not a polished portrait. It was exactly how I wanted people to remember him. I stood beneath the photograph and touched the frame. "We finally did it," I whispered. For years, the fund had existed in legal documents, investment reports, and conversations held beside hospital beds. That morning, it became a real place with unlocked doors. "You're talking to Grandpa again." I turned. Lily stood behind me carrying a box of printed programs. She had tied her hair back and wore a blue dress I had not seen before. "I talk to him often." "Do you think he answers?" "Not in words." She smiled. Rachel entered a few moments later with 2 trays of coffee. She wore a plain navy dress and comfortable shoes. There were no expensive accessories, no designer purse, and no careful performance of success. She looked tired, but she also looked more present than she had in years. "I brought regular and decaf," she said. "Did you save the receipt?" Lily asked. Rachel gave her daughter a mock-offended look. "Yes, your mother now saves every receipt." "That may be the most unbelievable part of this entire story," Lily replied. We all laughed. It was brief but natural. Those moments had begun returning slowly. Not because we pretended nothing had happened, because we stopped allowing everything that happened to control every conversation. Rachel still lived in the small apartment. She continued working at the Women's Resource Center after completing her required service hours. The director had offered her a part-time paid position coordinating employment workshops. For the first time in her professional life, Rachel was not planning celebrations for people who could afford luxury. She was helping women prepare resumes, arrange transportation to interviews, and find clothes that made them feel confident. The work changed her. Not immediately, not magically, but consistently. A month before the opening, Rachel introduced me to a woman named Helen Price. Helen was 64 and had spent almost 15 years caring for her husband after a construction accident. She managed his medications, physical therapy, and insurance appeals while their savings slowly disappeared. After he died, Helen applied for more than 40 jobs. Most employers never responded. One interviewer asked whether she believed she could keep up with younger employees. Her adult son suggested she sell her home and move into his basement. He said it would be easier for everyone. Helen wanted to become a medical assistant. "I know hospitals," she told me during her interview. "I know what frightened families need someone to explain. I just don't have the certificate that proves I know anything." She became the first recipient of a Richard Butler Second Chance Scholarship. Her tuition, transportation, and part-time caregiving expenses for her older sister would be covered. When I told her, she cried so hard that I cried with her. Rachel stood near the door that day watching us. Later, while we cleaned the meeting room, she said, "She sounds like you." In what way? She gave years of her life to people she loved. Then everyone treated those years like empty space on a resume. I looked at my daughter. That happens to many women. I know that now. She folded a stack of papers. "I used to think your life became small because you lacked ambition." The admission hurt, even though I already knew it. "What do you think now?" I think I confused being visible with being valuable. She did not ask me to praise her insight. She simply continued working. By 10 o'clock on opening day, the center was full. Women arrived with daughters, sisters, friends, and grandchildren. Local educators spoke about training programs. A financial counselor explained how the fund would help applicants recognize fraud and protect their property. Michael stood near the back of the room. When I saw him, I walked over and took both his hands. "You came. I would not miss this." He looked around the building. "You know, I used to think the tuition you paid for me was the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. It helped you finish one course. It did more than that. It told me someone believed my difficult season was not the end of my life." He looked toward the seated women. "That is what you are giving them." When the ceremony began, Patricia introduced the program. Helen spoke next. Her voice shook as she described losing her husband, her income, and eventually her confidence. "I thought being needed by my family had been my purpose," she said. "When no one needed me in the same way anymore, I did not know who I was." She held up the folder containing her scholarship documents. "This does not feel like charity. It feels like someone opened a door and trusted me to walk through it." The room filled with applause. I pressed a tissue against my eyes. Richard should have been there, but perhaps he was in every woman who sat straighter after hearing Helen speak. Michael then stepped onto the platform. He had not told me he planned to speak. Before Denise Butler created this fund, he began She Changed My Life in a much quieter way. He told the audience about being a struggling trainee, raising a child alone, and preparing to abandon his banking career because he could not afford certification. "She paid my tuition anonymously," he said. Years later, I learned the truth. By then, the promotion I received had led to every professional opportunity that followed. He looked at me. Denise did not ask whether helping me would benefit her. She simply saw potential during a season when I could not see it myself. The audience turned toward me. I felt embarrassed by the attention. Rachel watched from beside the platform. There were tears in her eyes. After Michael finished, Patricia invited me to speak. I told the audience about Richard, about the hospital waiting rooms, about the women whose unpaid labor had held families together while slowly erasing their own financial security. "This fund is not built on the belief that women need someone to save them," I said. "It is built on the belief that women deserve tools, opportunities, and respect while saving themselves." When I stepped down, Rachel approached Patricia and whispered something. Then she walked toward the microphone. My body tensed. Not because I feared what she would say, because some part of me still feared being publicly exposed by my own daughter. Rachel faced the audience. "My name is Rachel Dawson," she began, "and I am Denise Butler's daughter." She took a breath. "Several months ago, I humiliated my mother inside a bank. I called her useless because she refused to risk her home and her future to rescue me from choices I had helped make." The room became completely still. I believed a good mother should always give more. More money, more forgiveness, more sacrifice. I never stopped to ask what constant giving had already cost her. Rachel looked at me. I measured her value by how useful she was to my life. And when she finally placed a boundary between her love and my entitlement, I treated that boundary as betrayal. Her voice trembled. "I am not standing here to ask her to forgive me in front of all of you. Forgiveness should never be demanded as part of a public apology." Tears ran down her face. "I only want to say that this building shows who my mother has always been. She was never useless. I was simply too consumed by what I wanted to recognize what she had given." For several seconds, no one applauded. The silence was too emotional for immediate noise. Then Helen stood. Others followed. The applause rose around Rachel, but she kept looking at me. She did not open her arms. She did not expect me to cross the room and erase the distance between us. I walked toward her slowly. When I reached the platform, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I know." It was not the same as saying I had forgotten. It was not even the same as saying everything was forgiven. But I reached for her hand. Rachel held it carefully as though trust were something fragile that belonged to me. We stood together while the first group of scholarship recipients entered the hallway beyond us. For the first time, my daughter was not asking me to open a door for her. She was standing beside me, watching other women walk through one we had built from pain. And in that moment, I understood that healing did not always begin with an embrace. Sometimes it began with one hand offered honestly and another finally brave enough to accept it without demanding more. 1 year after Rachel called me useless inside the bank, we returned to the same branch together. The building had not changed. The same glass doors opened onto the same polished lobby. The same row of teller windows stretched along the far wall. Even the little table of deposit slips stood in the same place. But I was no longer the woman who had walked in believing she was being asked for a harmless favor. And Rachel was no longer the daughter who expected my signature to appear simply because she needed it. She paused outside the entrance. "Are you all right?" I asked. She looked through the glass. "I keep hearing myself say it." "Say what you know." I did. The word useless had lived between us for 12 months. Rachel had apologized for it more than once, but apologies did not always silence the memory of a wound. "We don't have to go inside together," I said. "Yes, we do." She opened the door. Several employees recognized me. One teller smiled and waved. Another woman whispered something to her colleague before both greeted us warmly. Rachel noticed. There had been a time when she would have been impressed by the attention. Now it seemed to make her uncomfortable. Michael came out of his office carrying 2 folders. "Mrs. Butler, Mrs. Dawson." He shook my hand, then Rachel's. "It is good to see both of you." "You too," Rachel said. He led us into the same conference room where her false signature had first been placed before me. For a moment I could almost see the past sitting around the table. Eric leaning back with practiced confidence, Rachel crying after admitting what she had done, Michael explaining that my money did not belong to anyone simply because they wanted it. Then the image faded. Only the 3 of us remained. Rachel placed a cashier's check on the table. "This is the first payment from my restitution agreement." Michael looked at the amount but did not pick it up. "You understand the bankruptcy administrator handles those payments." "Yes. Their office asked me to deliver it through the bank because several client claims are still being processed here." The check represented months of saving. Rachel now worked full-time as a program coordinator for a nonprofit organization that helped women return to employment after financial crisis or caregiving responsibilities. Her salary was modest. She took the bus on most days and continued living in the small apartment with Lily. The payment would not repair every loss caused by Dawson Premier events, but it was hers. Not borrowed, not hidden, not taken from me. Michael accepted the check. "I will make sure it reaches the administrator." "Thank you." Rachel released a slow breath. "I know it is not much. It is meaningful because you earned it," I said. She looked at me. A year earlier, she might have heard judgment in those words. Now, she heard what I meant. "I plan to keep paying," she said. "I know." Michael opened the first folder. "I also have an update on the Richard Butler Second Chance Fund." The program had grown faster than I expected. During its first year, it helped 43 women complete vocational courses, obtain professional certifications, or return to paid work. 8 families received temporary caregiving assistance. 17 women completed financial protection workshops. Several had discovered unauthorized credit accounts or suspicious property documents before serious damage occurred. Helen Price, our first scholarship recipient, had completed her medical assistant program and accepted a position at a cardiology clinic. When Michael read her name, I smiled. "She sent me a photograph of her new uniform," I said. "She sent one to the bank, too." He slid a copy across the table. Helen stood beside a clinic sign wearing blue scrubs and the widest smile I had ever seen. On the back, she had written, "Thank you for believing my life was not over." My eyes filled with tears. Richard would have loved her. Michael continued through the report. One woman had obtained a bookkeeping certificate after spending 12 years caring for her mother. Another had trained as a pharmacy technician at 61. A widow who had nearly lost her house to a fraudulent relative completed our financial literacy program and now volunteered at the center. The account that Rachel once believed should have been used to rescue one family had begun rebuilding dozens. Michael closed the folder. "There is one more matter." He handed me a set of advisory board documents. Patricia and I had discussed the change for several months. I placed the pages in front of Rachel. She read the first line, then looked up. "You want me on the board as a community advisor?" Her expression became cautious. "What does that mean?" "You would help review outreach programs, employment workshops, and applicant support. You would not control distributions, investments, or financial approvals." Rachel nodded slowly. "You don't trust me with the money." The old Rachel would have spoken those words as an accusation. This Rachel said them as a fact. "Not yet," I answered. Michael remained quiet. Rachel looked down at the document. "I understand. Do you?" "Yes." She traced one finger along the edge of the page. "You're offering me a place to serve, not a place to control. That is exactly what I'm offering." She picked up the pen but did not sign immediately. "What happens if I make a mistake? You will take responsibility for it. And if I disagree with you, you will say so honestly. And if I ever begin acting entitled again, I will remind you that love is not access." A faint smile touched her face. "That sounds like something Grandpa would say. He taught me well." Rachel signed her own name. I watched carefully. There was no imitation, no hidden purpose. Just my daughter accepting a limited role she had earned through steady work. After the paperwork was complete, Michael asked about Lily. "She was accepted at Ohio State," Rachel said proudly. "She starts in the fall." "That is wonderful." "She received an academic scholarship," I added. Michael smiled. "I assume the fund helped?" "No," Rachel said before I could answer. Lily applied independently. There was pride in her voice, but also principle. She knows Grandma would help in an emergency, Rachel continued. But she also knows being loved does not mean being entitled to someone else's money. I looked at my daughter. She had learned the lesson through a cost I once wished I could have spared her. Now I understood that sparing her might have prevented the lesson entirely. Eric's criminal case had ended several months earlier. He pleaded guilty to multiple financial charges after investigators uncovered additional records connected to customer funds and the false guardianship plan. He received a prison sentence and was ordered to pay restitution. Rachel had attended the final hearing but did not speak to him. She told me later that she felt no satisfaction watching him taken from the courtroom, only sadness for the years she had surrendered her judgment to someone who treated trust as a tool. But she no longer called that sadness love. When we left the conference room, Rachel stopped near the desk where our argument had taken place. A young couple sat there discussing a mortgage with a loan officer. "No one paid attention to us," Mom Rachel said. "Yes, I know I've apologized before." "You have. But I need to say this here. I waited. When I called you useless, I thought your value came from what you were willing to do for me." Her voice trembled. "I thought being your daughter gave me the right to your money, your house, your signature, and your forgiveness." She looked toward the front windows. "I was wrong about all of it. The word hurt, I said, but it was not the deepest wound." She met my eyes. "What was—" "You forgot I was a person before I was your mother." Tears appeared in her eyes. I continued gently. "I had memories you were willing to risk, a home you were willing to use, and a future you believed mattered less than yours. You looked at me and saw a resource. I know. That is what I needed you to understand. I do now." She did not ask whether everything was forgiven. She did not demand reassurance. She simply stood before me and allowed the truth to remain complete. "I cannot change what I did," she said. "But I can make sure I never look at you or Lily that way again." I believed her. Not because she cried. Not because she apologized beautifully. Because for 1 year, she had lived differently when there was no money, comfort, or reputation to reward her. I opened my arms. Rachel stepped into them. For a moment, I held the little girl who once watched me find errors in bank reports. Then I held the grown woman who had finally learned to find the error within herself. We walked out of the bank side by side. Neither of us rushed ahead. Neither followed behind. The secret account had exposed greed, deception, and wounds I once believed would destroy our family. But the money had not saved us. Truth had. Consequences had. And boundaries strong enough to protect love from becoming permission. Richard and I had created a financial legacy worth millions. But the greatest thing I would leave my daughter was not an account balance. It was the knowledge that dignity could be rebuilt, trust could be earned, and no woman, mother, widow, caregiver, or grandmother should ever have to surrender herself to prove that she loved her family. The deepest lesson in Denise's story is that love should never require a person to disappear. For many years, Denise believed being a good mother meant giving quietly, forgiving quickly, and carrying burdens no one else could see. She paid bills, surrendered dreams, protected her daughter from failure, and asked for nothing in return. But when generosity has no boundaries, the people receiving it may stop seeing the sacrifice behind it. They may begin to mistake kindness for obligation and love for unlimited access. Denise's refusal of the bank was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of self-respect. She understood that protecting her home, her signature, and her financial independence did not make her selfish. It made her responsible. No parent should have to lose their dignity to prove their love. No mother should be treated as a bank account, a safety net, or a resource that exists only when the family needs something. Rachel's journey also reminds us that forgiveness is not the same as escaping consequences. Real regret is not measured by tears or beautiful apologies. It is measured by what a person does after the apology, when rebuilding trust is slow, uncomfortable, and offers no immediate reward. Rachel changed because she stopped asking to be rescued. She accepted responsibility, faced the people she had harmed, and began choosing honesty, even when honesty cost her something. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is say no. Sometimes a boundary saves a relationship that constant sacrifice would eventually destroy. And sometimes losing comfort is what finally teaches someone to value truth, responsibility, and the people they once took for granted. It is never too late to protect yourself. It is never too late to begin again. Your age does not reduce your worth, and your role as a mother, wife, grandmother, or caregiver does not erase your right to have a life, a voice, and a future of your own. Do you believe Denise was right to refuse the loan? Could you have forgiven Rachel after everything she did? Share your honest thoughts in the comments, because your perspective may help someone facing a similar betrayal. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel for more emotional family stories about truth, courage, justice, and healing.